Sorry I made you wait. I've been a little bit busy, but part of what I'm here to talk about today are several ways in which I am about to become significantly less busy, such that there may be more room for more breaking changes in the future, but this time, this version, this release, version 21 of Breaking Change, the thing that is brand new that you haven't seen before, at least not in this program, not from backup. That's right, a clean restore, which, you know, in iPhone season has become a more precarious, legendary, challenging, and meaningless phrase as more and more of like our lives and settings and everything is really just in the cloud anyway. So what even does it mean to not use a backup? All right, so I'm glad to be here today. I am reporting live from Orlando, Florida, where tropical depression storm Milton, which if a hurricane kills me, that'd be named Milton, would be pretty great. That I could get behind. They'd be able to pronounce it at my memorial. That's good. Still not 100% sure on Helen. I'm realizing now that 100% of my hurricane-related news intake was textual. Anyway, so that's bearing down on us, but we got a few days to go, in theory. Where was I? Right. I'm in Florida. My name is Justin. This is the 21st version of this podcast. I probably have a bunch of new subscribers. While I don't track the metrics, I talked about the podcast in public, on a stage. I'll explain more later if you weren't there, seeing me on stage and then going and searching for this podcast, and then probably forgetting about it, because a week passed. And now it popped up in your feed, and you're like, what the fuck is this shit? And then you're like, oh my god, he just said fuck and shit. But he didn't say cock or balls. So that's the kind of thing that you might get here. Didn't say those words. Yeah, so let's kick it off with some life updates. I wasn't even done with the old hurricane yet before the new hurricane got here. So with Mount St. Hurricane Helene, whatever we're calling it, when that came in, I was up in Toronto, just apparently just barely outside of the hurricane path. I didn't realize that like Appalachian Western North Carolina was in danger of getting hit by hurricanes, but it definitely makes me feel slightly less safe in Orlando. So I was up in Toronto, and I'm going to settle on Helen. I'm just imagining. I don't know. I hate that we name these things. In Japan, the hurricane are called typhoon. There's a meaningless distinction between what makes one the other, but by and large, we just different languages have different words for things. But they don't name them after people. They name them by number, and the numbers go up. And so like it's actually a handy way to track it, because climate change becomes more apparent when it's like, we're already at typhoon number like 37 and it's only October. Anyway, so I was blessed to not have any real serious damage. I live in a new house where like the house itself has like 7 feet of grade. So they build a little hill, they put the house on top. We also have really good drainage. And because the house borders Disney World, we got great access to public utilities and redundant power. In fact, in Orlando area and in Central Florida, whenever there's a storm coming, all of the Disney hotels book up, even though restaurants might be closed, even though the parks might be closed. And the reason is that people have faith that the Disney infrastructure will be more durable and resilient than the state and local infrastructure from a power and sanitation perspective. So I'm not super worried about this next one. I'll take it seriously and I'll follow any advisements. But it's really hard to talk about something when you're so unconfident about how to say it. Helena If I check them all off, then I'll at least have covered my bases. Uh, it knocked down an Italian cypress tree in my yard, and in my area, there's lots of neighborhoods with the word cypress in them. Presumably, there were cypress forests or something here, cypress swamps, I guess. And the neighborhood has a whole bunch of Italian cypress trees, which are a special kind that are very long and pointy. And if they were ever in Florida, they were probably cloistered in big groups because when you just put two in front of a house and they are just like, pixie sticks sticking out of the ground with barely any, root system, they have a funny habit of falling over when there's high wind. So I used to have like 3, maybe 4 of them. And now I have 0 of them. So after the hurricane, you email the landscaper that or I have an arborist as well. I emailed both of them. One of them quoted me $600 to remove the relatively dinky tree. And so the lawn mowing crew, I went up and said, "Hey, you got a chainsaw?" He said, "Yeah, I got a chainsaw." I said, "Hey, you want $20?" He said, "Yeah, I want $20." I said, "Hey, you want to just chop this tree up and then put it over there?" And then he did that for me. So fortunately, the rescue and recovery effort at the Searles household is complete just in time for the next one. I literally have 1 tree left on my property, down from 4 or 5 when I moved here only 3 years ago. So not a friend of the trees. The Lorax is pissed. I finally am all caught up from that trip. Generally, Becky and I we basically had like a bonus sprint in Agile terms, I guess. We had 1 more week that there were just enough undone things that we post-launch still needed to finish or to fix. Initial feedback from users, things that she and I had each separately noticed about copy and about like little tiny tweaks in how the application worked. And I wanted to time box it so it just didn't drag on forever. And I said, you can have as much of my time as you want for 1 week until Friday at 5 p.m. And we prioritized, we worked together. There was, the pain of knowing not everything can get done, but it was productive. And I really hustled. And that's, I literally shipped my last fix to make the navigation on Becky Graham and the website look consistent, and then get the sizing for that right. And the ship was at 5:00 p.m. And then it was hands off keyboards and I was done. But from January 1st until that minute, I've been living with this as the overriding obligation in my life. And at 5:01, Becky was ready to celebrate and kind of formally hand off ownership of the Build with Becky application, which you can go sign up for now at betterwithbecky.com, which is a website that will tell you what you get. It is $30 a month, which is actually a fantastic deal when you compare it to the cost of like having a personal trainer talk to you for 30 minutes, much less design a program for you every month with, workouts that are not only, research backed and good. And of course, you get an interactive like workout player in the app that you can use to, it tells you which workout to do. You can swap out all the exercises. You can do it in real time. You can use multiple devices. It's a modern web application. It's pretty nice and yada, yada, and so forth. But yeah, for just $30 a month, it's actually a pretty good deal. And then every month, every 5 weeks, the program changes just like that. And then you have a new opportunity to do practice progressive overload, get stronger in new ways, and keep your body on its toes, so to speak. Unless you're doing a chin up, I guess, because then the toes, they come off the floor. But that's good for your lats and for your abdominals. I've learned a lot as the chief supportive husband officer of the Better with Becky family brands. So yeah, that was a long, focused period of time. And I set obligation intentionally because like the way that I work is I am very, very, very committed to when I commit to somebody, whether it explicitly or if I'm in a situation where their validation or their approval is going to be materially impactful to my life, like a boss at a job, I will never think a thought that doesn't somehow pass some low pass filter in my consciousness to cross-check how does this influence my ability to follow through on that commitment. So it's a complicated way of saying I will never truly relax. I will never truly be able to just turn it off. It is asynchronously always there because my brain is always processing ways to avoid failure and make progress when I am at my desk or when I am in a committed mode of working. So really, 5:01 p.m. Friday was like the first time that I had no obligations to anyone but myself since I was talking in terms of like a day-to-day perspective. Since I was, I don't know, ever. I guess school was always that. And I never had a day without a job or school, I suppose. So I knew I wasn't going to get to it's going to be a process to adjust to a more self-directed life. And I know a lot of people who see what I do will say, well, Justin, a guy who rambles explicitly on a podcast for 3 hours, who has a monthly newsletter, who does all this open source, who blogs about whatever the fuck he wants, who's got no inhibition about sharing his opinions and salty takes. You do not strike me as a particularly constrained fellow, you might think. But the truth of it is that it's actually worse, in a sense. While I do have a tremendous amount of privilege to say whatever the fuck I damn well please, that I apparently have no problem taking advantage of, I also have been feeling since, I don't know, I was talking to Becky about this recently because we've obviously been processing a lot this transition for, her to be running her business as the, solo founder, and what that entails, and for me to be figuring out what would I do if I had my druthers. I think what happened was my first job out of college, I was working at a big consulting firm, and we were expected, one day we were sat down and we were told, okay, so you need to come up with your billable goal for 2007. And I said, okay, so it's how many hours I'm going to bill this year? They said, yes. I said, okay, well, I don't know, man, 30 hours a week sounds pretty good to me. So multiply that by, and it's like, oh, sorry. The suggested goal is 1,800 hours, which you work that out and it's, full-time equivalent with a few percent for overhead. And I was like, oh, well, is it like the minimum? And it was literally the Office Space pieces of flair conversation. Now that I think of it, I don't know that I ever connected these before. From the, the TGI Fridays, how many pieces of flair pins do you put on your little lanyard to show your spirit? And I was like, okay, so you're not going to tell me this is the minimum, but you are looking askance at me like my career depends on me saying that I want at least 1,800. And so, you write down 1,800. And then they look at you and they're like, okay, so you want to meet expectations, huh? And I was like, fuck's sake, just tell me what to put here, bud. And they wouldn't do that either, which is super helpful. And so I said, you know what? I'm going to procrastinate. And I just kind of put it off. But once the project got rolling, and once I started working for these folks, the projects were always, fixed bid, fixed scope, tight timelines, came in with waterfall-y expectations of knowing exactly what they needed and all 800 bullet point features up front, and they'd been promised contractually in the beginning, and if anything had to change, a formal change request had to go in and be negotiated and priced. And my teams, who were all more experienced, better credentialed, got better grades in school, went to better computer science programs. I was not even there to program necessarily. My teams were just so content careening towards failure, in general. A lot of individuals who were really fantastic, but collectively, there just wasn't the traction. And when you have 5 good individuals on a team, but they are not functioning like a team, if they're all going in different directions, all you're going to end up doing is, that's how people get drawn and quartered, I guess, right? Which is a grisly illusion, sure. But, for me, having, I think we had a grand total of $3,000 and about $1,500 in fixed expenses each month, and a mountain of small mountain, but a mountain, a 2007 adjusted mountain size dog pile of student loans. Like it was, I needed that job. And so I just, I would look at these situations and be like, the economy hadn't gone south yet. I said, I want to not be the lowest guy in the totem pole. And in big consultancies, very often just like how long you survive determines how long, where you stack rank in the org. But I didn't know that. I just thought if I did hard work, I would be rewarded immediately. So I just nose to the grindstone, and I billed well over 2,000 hours that year, my first year. Well over. Like, I did the math once, and if I didn't take a single day off or a single holiday, and if I worked, it worked out to significantly more than 40 hours a week, still. And I got used to that tempo of just always being on, always working, always grinding, up super early, out the door. Becky too, she was a teacher her first year as well, a brand new high school Spanish teacher. She looked younger than most of her students. It was a common source of no doubt frustration. And she was a very dedicated professional herself. And so we kind of just sank our teeth into work real hard. And when I look back on it, when I changed jobs the first time, I went from that consultancy to an agile consultancy called Pillar Technology. And thanks to a confluence of events like my receding hairline and their valuing my experience and my communication ability as a consultant more than just my skill rather than my experience necessarily, number of years. I came in at a higher salary, more seniority, and the expectation was I bill 40 hours a week, but no more. So even though I was traveling, I was actually like devoting way less time to work. And I was able to do it in 4x10s. So I could get up at 3 a.m. on Monday, drive 3 hours to Farmington Hills, Michigan, 3.5 maybe, work my ass off until Thursday at 5 or 6, and then drive home, get home at 8 or so on Thursday. And that gave me Fridays to just do other stuff. But, the mind doesn't turn off. And I was already habituated to this level of, kids call it hustle, but when you work in an enterprise, it's just workaholism, I guess. I started making little open source things. I started making a little, I call them weekend projects because I always had Friday, Saturday, Sunday to work on them for that, a couple of years. And it's where when people would see me, they're like, oh, look at all these hobbies. He's got all this free time. He's free spirit, but it came from a place of just still overwork. And this it was always me stealing time or feeling like I was stealing time from my employer, or whoever, to try to carve out permission for me to do something that was self-directed or for my own sake. And that was, it's no doubt how a lot of people live, but to think of every creative thing you ever do as having to be, oh, I got to eke this out. And it was always true too, whenever I was consulting and I was also giving a conference talk or doing anything else, to be like, all right, well, I got to find time to do the conference talk, but I got to meet my commitments to my clients. And if I touch my slides from 9 to 5, that's me robbing them, right? Or shortchanging them. And even when I'm not billing by the quarter hour or whatever, it's, I believe in my heart that it would come up to bite me if I was ever anything less than truthful and anything less than fully bought in. And so all my time to build, slide decks for all this time was always coming in overtime. And, that was great for the business. It was great for my speaking career and open source and my Twitter persona of just being a snarky shit poster. It was less good for my physical and mental health, wasn't as fantastic for my marriage as you might imagine. Or my friendships. Don't really have a lot of friends in Columbus, Ohio, who weren't work colleagues. Still, it's one reason we left. And I've been riding that walrus, just sort of titrating off, like, obligations to others, gradually. But here I am now, and I am finally there. Wasn't meaning just to jump into that. But I guess I probably should explain where that puts me in life. So Test Double, the agency that I founded with Todd Kaufman back in 2011, we are a software consulting firm. We deploy some of the best, absolute phenomenal developer humans. They're hybrid class individuals where they're both being very good at being developers and very good at being humans. Communicative, empathetic, experienced, wise, and also, tack sharp technologists. Test Double and now product consulting, by the way. We joined forces with a really fantastic product consulting company. So we're moving into that stage now, I suppose. 100+ people firm, like interdisciplinary skill set, able to bring entire teams to bear to solve complex problems. It's the dream. Well, 13 years have passed, and right now, we reached a point where we had the leadership in place. In 2020 we went employee owned, 100% employee owned. So all of the shares of the company are now either held by a trust. I don't really remember the mechanics. A trust is involved holding the shares. All I know, I'm not holding them. And every year on January 1st, the accountants look in arrears and calculate, first the valuation of the company, then how many, what's an equitable distribution of 1/30th of the outstanding shares. And then those are distributed to the staff based on proportional compensation. So it's a very fair way to get stock equity in people's hands. And ultimately, it's part of the retirement plan, right? Of course, you still have a generous 401k and all this other stuff. And so part of doing that in 2020 was to paint a picture of what it looks like for us to outgrow the founders over the long horizon. And it was a excellent focusing element to bring in just executives who could be specialists and fully bought into all of the main primary functions of a scaling software consultancy, where previously we had two co-founders who were, I wouldn't say making it up as we went, but, largely learning on the job and also juggling lots of different disparate responsibilities. And I'll only speak for myself, but my ability to pinch hit in sales and in marketing, branding, all the external messaging stuff that I did was at times, I think, really good. Really, I did a lot of great output. Some of the best work in my life, some of the stuff that I'm most proud of. But there was sort of like a singer with a very narrow range. I'm very good at speaking from personal experience and about the range of emotions that I feel individually or right in front of me. But I have a whole lot of blind spots of imagining, circumstances that are maybe outside of my ability or my reach or my interests, right? And the company was just hitting a scale where it needed, serious leadership who could think bigger than just what does one highly opinionated developer think is the best way to do something. And having a single, benevolent dictator for life on the kind of like, this is what we believe and the technologies we use and stuff is actually like a huge reason that I wanted to help start this company. We were surrounded at the time, it seemed like, by highly opinionated boutique software agencies that had all pretended that they'd found the silver bullet. They'd cracked the case. Look at our, I'm not going to name names here, but like look at our path to how apprentices become craftspeople. Look at our process. Our process has finally figured out how to help business people make software, software startups. Look at like this way that we write code, or this way that we can contribute to open source, and how it supports us to build apps. The process, or the people, like individual people, were always the thing being sold as like thought leaders or kind of sacred individuals. I never wanted to be that either, right? So I could see two real problems, right? Like long term is I didn't want this to be a cult of personality around me, and at every step in the company's history, I was always trying to foster a healthy amount of, disrespect for me and my opinions to try to, as best as I could, promote dissent. And I fell short a lot because I'm also like really thin skinned, and I was super aware of that too. But also like I just had an inability, I had a lack of range to start stepping into either other roles or to imagine change at the company that was outside my personal comfort zone. Long-winded way to say, we need to hire experts who could, do those things professionally. And, just because I struggle sometimes, like I can wear the hat that says like, hey, in a perfect world, would it like, if I was detached from the situation, like what would the company do? And I could say, oh, we should do X. And it's like, okay, so go and figure out a plan on how to do X. And they're like, oh, that sounds like not something I'm good at. Can we just keep doing Y? Because that would be more comfortable. So we ended up hiring excellent people in sales and marketing, excellent people for supporting our folks as we scaled, to make sure that everyone was taken care of, aligned, had what they needed to be successful. Increasingly executive leadership who had, the financial and organizational rigor needed to promote the company's health long-term, as well as to identify and execute on strategic plans. And if you look at like, and so that was in flight for sure before this ESOP event in 2020. But like, if you look since COVID, the company's been performed phenomenally. Like sure, it has been tough because the industry has been hit really hard, but Testable is in great shape. And it's because we've got people who are bought in because they are now owners. And we've got leaders and managers and support personnel who are super aligned, and they are there because they are experts and they are passionate about their different functions that they serve the company. And that was always what we were working towards as we were scaling, was we didn't want anyone to have to like, half-ass two roles. We wanted to identify a seat on the bus for everyone. So anyway, company's in great shape now, and it afforded me the opportunity to take a step back from day-to-day stuff at Testable. So I'm sharing this because I got asked a lot of questions about, hey, you guys cool, or what's happening, or like, hey, you seem to be not talking about, your company anymore. Is everything okay, or sales right? Or, people were filling in blanks from all this talk that I've been doing about all these other extracurriculars. And I thought I'd set the record straight. I'm a board member at Testable still. So we have board meetings quarterly, but I'm also engaged in conversations with our leaders, managers, and really anyone in the company that wants to talk, and supporting however I can. But the good news is that I am actually like not needed for very much. And it's not just like in the past year I haven't been needed for very much. It's the last several years where increasingly I was having to dig pretty deep to find areas in the company where I could actually like be useful. And when and when you have some people in our, neck of the woods, they lack awareness as a founder or as a person with like a power dynamic or power gradient, I think might be even the fancier way to say it, over other people, is that your mere presence can stifle other people from thriving, and your voice can drown out their creativity or their perspectives. And every time I was in a room, I could feel it. And every time I opened my mouth, I could see it. That, that was a cost. Like my continued involvement was creating a certain amount of drag. And that meant that the bar for me continuing to contribute day in, day out to what was going on at Testable was necessarily offset by, to what extent am I holding somebody back from really like stepping up by just continuing to be here? Not in some sort of like enabling way, but in a way that's like, like, hey, maybe they've got just different opinions than me, and I'm a really like strong, loudmouth individual. And maybe their opinion's the right one, right? Because they're probably more plugged in than I am at this point. And so that's, that it was clear to me like well over a year ago, that we'd actually already kind of reached that inflection point. So we put the pieces in place. We already had the team, the company's, like I said, in great shape, great relationships. It was so awesome to see so many of the team last week in person. And yeah, that's pretty much where things stand. It's unusual. People aren't used to hearing the story of person co-founds company. Everything goes really great. It's a sustainable, thriving business. Then hands over a bunch of the equity to the employees instead of just some, PE firm or to the VC firms that backed them, because none backed us. We were bootstrapped. Where not only do those shares get in people's hands, but then, operators, executives who are optimized for the next stage of our growth are put in place, and they are set up for success. And, then a founder exits, and it's actually like at the right time and healthy. And they're not just logging off forever. Like they're still engaged and available. And, I'm speaking now into a podcast, having not really, talked about this very much out loud with people outside the immediate circle. But I feel like this is actually one reason there's a tinge of awkwardness here is like the story never ends this well. But here it is, ending this well. And it's the ending of, it's the final chapter or whatever of like, my level of engagement. Like maybe I'll be on the board forever. But it's more the company has reached a stage where it doesn't need one of its co-founders day to day. And there's no acrimony. We all love each other, In fact, I'm better friends than ever, I would say, with like most of the people involved, because now, they're set up to succeed and thrive, and I'm definitely not holding anyone back. And I think we're all happier on that. It just like it's such a clean, tidy story that seems to not happen in this current era of capital B business. But here we are, and while I'm proud of that and I'm happy about it, it's actually made it like sort of. It's just so it's unusualness. When I've shared this news with a few people, even that breeds suspicion, because they're like, oh, come on, no, man. All co-founders eventually divorce, have a big blow up. And it's true. Like I look around and I see a lot of other 50-50 software partnerships where things blew up, but that's not what happened here. I am so grateful for the team at Testable, because they're people who hold true to the same set of values, and for each discipline that they work in, the principles that tie them together for the jobs that they do are earnestly believed and diligently executed on and inspected regularly to identify new ways to get better. And ways that we can better serve others, clients and the world. And so to have been a part of that and have been like, view myself as like just somebody who kind of gets that little pebble started pushed down the mountain more than anything, is something I'll always be really, really proud of. And I'll always have a connection to. And, but at that point, like, anything cool that you've seen Testable do for like the last several years, I don't deserve the credit for that. They do. The people in the company. And that's one of the really weird things about companies. You don't see it very much, especially at product companies, because there's this sort of like delineation between the tangibility of like, this is the product, and these are the people who made it. And it's like, you know, you can imagine people at whiteboard sessions and stuff. But with services agencies like ours, I have an outsized following compared to a lot of the individuals at Test Double, but like tweets don't move the needle. Certainly not anymore. You know, fancy blog posts that get a lot of views, they might build a little bit of awareness, but that's not what like makes the company valuable. Like what makes the company valuable are the individuals who are showing up every day to clients and forming high trust relationships as they move, you know, carry the ball forward on delivering a really important project to that business, as they pair program and teach people other things like while they work. You know, that's where like the magic happens. And that's where what people come back for. And those are the ingredients to the like success of the business. So anyway, that's why I'm saying like, holy crap, now what? So I'm processing a little bit. I hope that was clear. If it wasn't, I'm sure I fell short in that explanation, but yeah, just nothing but love. I seeing how Test Double has stepped into this role now as being sort of certainly the premier Ruby and Rails agency, kind of globally, in terms of our impact. You know, there's a handful I had mentioned as being, you know, coincident peers that I have nothing but respect for as well. But, you know, we show up to every conference that we can, and we do kind of like office hours for people who want to pair program, for people who want to like talk through a hard problem at work, whether it's a, you know, interpersonal problem, a human problem, or a technical problem, whatever. And that's the way we sponsor at conferences. And I love that about us, because like setting up a booth and giving out swag is cool and all, but like helping people out and paying for the privilege to have a space and some tables and a, you know, quiet, you know, place to go to support other people about the things that really matter. You know, the reason we do it is it's a higher impact thing than giving somebody a squeezy ball, stress ball, stress toy. So yeah, it was really cool to just see that in action again at Rails World. All right, so the first thing that I thought to do with my newfound freedom wasn't to relax. I still have to relearn how to do that properly. It was to thoroughly clean the closet in my office, the closet in my gym, which had become something of an overflow closet of boxes and bullshit. And also to, in theory, this is easy, but some of you will know that this is not necessarily a breeze. I wanted to move my Mac Studio from the right side of my desk to the left side of my desk. And so about 4.5 hours later of disconnecting every wire, reconnecting every wire, moving the microphone to the left side so I can mount a camera to the right. So that, you know, put the key lights back up, redo all of the kind of like the charging situation was a mess, and all the wattages were way wrong because you got all the kind of bank of devices over on a little sidecar table here. It was an ordeal, but now I'm looking around me, and this is the, you know, I got rid of had a friend come over, pick up an old TV that just been sitting in a closet since the day I moved in here. Gonna send another friend a monitor. Yeah, it was great to clean house a little bit. I'm feeling lighter, feeling fresh. Also, while I'm thinking about time and having more of it and trying to spend a little bit less of it just glued to a computer, squinting at code, Becky had made a comment a couple months ago, not even a couple weeks ago, I don't know. But the turnaround time from Becky says a thing to I justify it into spending thousands of dollars, that is, the contractions are shortening. So some number of days ago, was it hours? Becky said, hey, you know, I was just looking at our pictures from Japan where I had a Sony some combination of Rs, 1s, Xs, and Rs, R1XR. It's this full frame Sony digital camera that I bought in 2019. for the year that we spent in Japan. It's not the lens wasn't interchangeable. It's just a 35 millimeter fixed frame lens. And it was a great camera to carry around because it was small enough I could just sort of throw it in my travel bag. And the Zeiss lens was fantastic. And they haven't made another camera like it since, unfortunately, because I'd probably buy another one. And I think in this market they would sell gangbusters if in my opinion, kind of the mediocre Fuji X100T, that's the right model number, is just blowing up because it can simulate film grain. Sorry, I just have very little respect for trying to make digital look like film. When I play a video game, the first things I do is like turn off film grain, turn off chromatic aberration, ultra widescreen. Fuck that. Just give me I want the raw pixels in my eyes. While she was looking at photos from that year, she's like, man, I love our photos from that year. It looks so clear. The memories are so much more vivid. It doesn't have this sort of smear of iPhone photography. And, we'll talk more about the new iPhones later because there's new iPhones. Hey, there you go. Something to talk about there. And the only thing that's different is the camera. I wanted to try those first. And they are better. For sure they're better, but it's not the same. It's not... Nothing right now still, sadly. It's not that, of course, optically, a phone lens is just only going to be able to get so much light hitting a sensor. And one way that I was hoping this would go, or thinking it might go 9 years ago, was we would just see, more camera systems that were like telescopic lenses and really like mechanical apertures and stuff like that in phones. But instead what we saw was silicon gets cheaper a lot faster than mechanical devices get waterproof. So instead we saw an increased emphasis on image processing. And that's great. And now with AI, it's only going to be supercharged. And so everything's going to have this sort of like sheen to it. And of course, The Verge is famous for asking the question, what is a picture at this point? Well, I wanted to be able to capture more light more quickly and have better pictures. Also wanted to be spending less time on my computer. So for my next trip, I was like, you know what? What if I just didn't take a computer and I bought a nice camera instead? So Becky had made that mention, and then I started doing some research, and I spent like an hour or two back and forth with ChatGPT in one window and YouTube in the other as I'm looking at different reviews. And I landed on purchasing the Sony A7 Mark IV. Which is an interchangeable lens mirrorless camera. It is obviously I just didn't want to get into the interchangeable lens game because I don't want to be that guy, and I don't want the temptation to like, oh, if only I had this slightly bigger, heavier lens. I also, watching Aaron precariously try to change out the lenses on his camera. He's got an Olympus while we're in the field, and like hoping that no dust gets in. Like I don't need that in my life. So I just bought it with the kit lens. It was like $2,600 all in. And if you buy this shit on Amazon, the only way that the various resellers can try to get a leg up on one another is that they will like create these hilarious bundles of 45 pieces of shit. So I've got a box over there with 45 pieces of shit, and I got to be careful not to lose any of the pieces of shit because then it'll fuck it up if I need to return this thing. So about $2,600 all in. It's a big investment. I hope to get, my money's worth out of it. I am more comfortable with spending like a big chunk of money on something if the fact that it was expensive will itself influence my behavior to make sure that I get my money's worth. Like the Vision Pro is a wonderful example of that. This application I wrote for Becky would not have happened the same way. I would not have hit this good of an outcome had it not been for the Vision Pro's Mac Virtual Display, where I have a gigantic fucking 4K theater in my face that successfully influenced me into not getting distracted. I would just fly from a productivity perspective. My neck strength also went up. But it was because it was $3,500 that I was like, well, if I use this, 12 hours a day for 6 months, then, amortize, that's not so expensive. So I'm going to get into the big boy camera game again. First time with interchangeable lenses, so I think that's something new, even though my plan is to not interchange them. the menu system looks just comically scary. But the thing that I like and the thing that I was prioritizing is I don't want to become a camera otaku. I want to have the fastest autofocus I can, the best people detection I can, because that's usually what I want to focus on. The very little interest in manual controls, so I just want to have the best auto modes, or a mode I can configure as being what I want most of the time, or a handful of modes for different scenarios, so that all I have to think about in my dumb meat brain while I'm taking pictures is which of these 2 or 3 modes do I want to be in for this given circumstance. I don't really plan on taking video with it, but as a nice bonus, I mentioned mounting a camera. I'm going to mount a camera to the right side of my desk, angle it so it's not pointing at the windows exactly, so you're going to get a lovely profile of my very flat face. For potentially starting to do screencast, because I'm going to be learning new stuff, right? This is done with this app. I want to do stuff that's completely new. My goal all along here has been I want to build apps, like native applications for iOS and for Vision OS. I got more ideas than I've got years left, but I'm going to start by learning Swift properly and try to get engaged and force myself to get bought into Apple's various ecosystem of platform tools and stuff, and do things, kind of follow their golden path. And that's probably going to be infuriating for me. And so I thought, hey, it would be really fun if I screencasted my own education in Swift and in Xcode and all that. I've used these things before. I mean, I shipped an app to the App Store in 2010 and had an iPhone one that got rejected just a few months after the original 2008 App Store opening. So but Objective-C and Xcode of that era on my little MacBook was a totally different game than what we deal with now. So I'd love to, share that, right? So that's the fact that the modern SLRs like this one are mirrorless. I don't even want to bother with the correct terminology for what to call these cameras. Having a fancy camera that can plug into a computer and then be a webcam and stream over a tool like OBS is very appealing to me. So that's cool because phones kind of also suck at that. Yeah. So anyway, look forward to that. I posted a picture of the camera yesterday, which weirdly was the best looking macro shot I've gotten out of my 16 Pro so far. So go figure. I was like, oh, did I just make a huge mistake? And we will find out. Stay tuned. All right. Well, it's time. That's all the life updates. I know that was a lot. Had some housekeeping, I guess. Thanks for bearing with. It'll only lighten up from here because it is time for follow-up. Speaking of Apple's ecosystem of software, I've become a public beta user, not because I want new features, although it's totally because I want new features each summer with the new iOS and the new macOS betas drop. I use those public betas both because I want the new features, but also because I have found that since the catastrophic iOS 13, which came in really hot and still didn't work at launch, Craig Federighi and Apple's engineering organization has so thoroughly reoriented itself around stable releases and moving unstable stuff to subsequent milestones like point releases later in the year, that on net, the betas have been about as stable for me. Maybe I would say 10% buggier in terms of user experience, where buttons don't do what they should do, or I got to restart the device. And if you don't want your phone to be 10% buggier, which most people don't, they won't install the beta. And that if it was taken in isolation would make sense. However, the X factor here is that as summer hits, all of the services that people have been updating on the iCloud side, the data migrations, the server side enhancements to support new features, those things were all coded by people running, suppose you say alpha internal builds of these applications. those go live to the real production iCloud as soon as the public developer betas are available. And one thing will be true, which is that like if the private internal, like if the servers that the developers are using day in, day out against their builds are working, you know, like for them, like they're going to have that tight feedback loop, right? You release you migrate all that stuff, the server side stuff, into the kind of like the one true iCloud of everything. And I don't know how they version their APIs, right? But like some amount of this stuff goes live, even if you're still on the stable OS in July. So like, oh, I'm not using the beta, but it's July. And year after year, I'm hearing more and more people tell me, oh man, this just feels like buggier than usual. Like, you know, whatever. And they'll describe it and I'll be like, that sounds like a bug that was probably a regression introduced by a server-side change. So what it probably means, and then I'll be on the beta and I'll check, and I don't have the bug, right? What it probably means is that the developers whose eyes are strictly focused on getting this next major release out, and they are simpatico, they've got the next release version on their phones. That's the version that's in the servers. That's what they're pushing to every day. No one's thinking about the current stable release. And so like when half your platform is in servers and half your platform is on local devices, the meaning of a stable release doesn't really mean that anymore if the live server version is actually the next version, right? So I don't know if I'm explaining this well, but I think like just public service announcement, whether you've been suffering or struggling with this or not, I think that a really good case can be made that like once the public betas hit, it's actually like more like the user experience overall, the number of bugs they're going to experience overall is actually lower on the betas than on the public releases, because all the server side stuff is being coded for the next release and it's already live. And any regressions that they find are going to be from traditional support channels, which are slow as molasses, and only then will they be prioritized against, the next major milestone, which is this drop dead date that we have to get this on these new phones. And so even fixing that shit gets deprioritized. So anyway, that's how I rationalize running on the betas. And I it's been a few weeks since I podcasted because that note predates the actual release of iOS 18, which is out, which, it was really actually sad. Speaking of the hurricane, Apple does not push out these releases, the major releases. They don't push them down to end users who don't opt into them until usually like the 0.1 release. So early adopters can go and they can get iOS 18. It's kind of like a way to do a gradual rollout. Unfortunately, though, this hurricane hits the Southeast, and only the kind of eager adopters or people who'd maybe heard in the run up to the storm, hey, update your phones because you'll get iMessage with satellite. So some percentage of people had satellite iMessage, but many more would have if Apple had the foresight to proactively push it. And maybe they could have pushed it just in that region the day before or 2 days before. But there's already been reports of like lives being saved. So how cool is that, right? That like people who are disconnected from infrastructure because of power outages and so forth are nevertheless able to organize and seek help and find help. Not just emergency rescue services now, like in iOS 18, anyone with an iPhone 14, I want to say, or later, will be able to iMessage anybody, even without a cellular connection or a Wi-Fi connection, which is pretty fucking cool. Other stuff, last month, I complained about Squarespace having a kind of shitty editor that I wasn't a fan of, or that I was dreading. I stand by that. Not impressed. Their new Fluid engine. So if you're a podcaster or a YouTuber and you are repping Squarespace as being the thing that you tell everyone to make websites with, I mean, you gotta. I get it. You gotta get your bag. You gotta pay the bills, but maybe be a little less enthusiastic. One of the things I thought was really weird, and just a little side note, a little bit of technical archaeology for you. I was digging into the CSS classes because I was trying to override the CSS for a very specific thing at betterwithbecky.com, and you can kind of dig in, and if you can find it, I'll send you a Cracker Jack prize in the mail. What I customize, that is. Look at those classes, and those classes have a whole lot of suffixes that say YUI, and as you play around with it, and you realize how bad the drag and drop is and how like just finicky a lot of the various elements are, I started thinking, is this actually a fork of the Yahoo User Interface Toolkit, YUI? Which I think formally, it was Douglas Crockford, I want to say, worked on it. This is like ancient fucking history. This is like the mid 2000s, late 2000s. It was retired in like 2010, I want to say. Maybe earlier. So anyway, like if this is actually using some variant or some fork of YUI and it's the new thing that they're pushing, that would certainly explain the dissonance between their marketing and that is Squarespace's marketing about how awesome their editor is, and this apparent user experience, which feels just absolutely broken out the gate. So, you know, plus they're about to be bought by private equity, yeah, Becky's asking already, like, 'cause she's had some trouble. She's like, "Are you sure about this?" And I think we may end up only using Squarespace for this landing page. At which point, yeah. Well, we paid for a year. We'll see how that goes. If you got any Squarespace hot tips, I don't know that I want them, because I don't want to solve more problems with Squarespace than I actually absolutely have to. All right. Let's talk a little bit about Rails World. So Rails World is a conference. It is the worldwide conference for Ruby on Rails, which is a framework for making web applications. I've been using that thing since 2005-ish, on and off. It came out around then, so early adopter. And Rails World is the new sort of, you know, there's a new Rails Foundation led by a board of companies that use Rails that have funded this foundation, and they're putting on a conference every year. And the goal is, let's have more sophisticated marketing for Rails and why it's great. Let's have better educational opportunities for people who want to learn Rails and get into it. And let's connect people with opportunities, right? Like by being kind of this marketplace of people who have skills and people who need help. So the conference was in Amsterdam last year for its inaugural, and this time it was in Toronto. Next year it's going to be back in Amsterdam. Was held in a really cool venue out on the outskirts of Toronto called Brickworks or something, Green Brickworks. It looked like an old ironworks or something that was renovated sort of in a hipstery way to be a kind of convention-y center, sort of multi-purpose space. I think in the winter they say they turn it into like an ice rink because indoor outdoor, and it was very cool. So I went and I spoke. The trip there was relatively uneventful. We flew on American Airlines and noticed that they got rid of screens. I don't know if that's every plane, but like it was a pretty new plane. Didn't have any screens in the back seats. And I was kind of happy about that because, I don't know, the screens are never really good quality anyway, and everyone's traveling with a phone or iPad, and the Wi-Fi allows you to stream that stuff. So, increasingly, like I felt like our chairs were way more spacious than they would have been if there was a big screen system. In fact, I was able to throw my entire computer like in a little like poppet in the middle area, even though I was in a bulkhead, and that normally would have been one of those really awkward screens that you gotta crane up and turn over. Only downside was that the people who didn't have a screen device in front of them. So on every one of these flights, there's a certain number of people who just like watch Fox News, and that pacifies them. And on our flight, there was a handful of very loud, very drunk people who didn't have their Fox News pacifier. And that was a little bit disruptive. So I can see from a crowd control perspective, telling people that they got to solve their own entertainment, you're going to get a variety of reactions. Yeah, the other than that, arrival was great. We got picked up at the airport, and the ride to the far east side of town took a while. Toronto, it turns out, has had a lot of people move to it. Traffic was pretty bad everywhere. It was a lot of Ubering everywhere. So you know, I realize now how fortunate my experience has mostly been like, you know, and not every city can accommodate this. You know, conferences that are generally walking distance, right? Like, you know, conference hotel, conference venue. Now, like the downside is it very often means that you're stuck in a convention hotel and a convention center. But yeah, there was a lot of, you know, I think in 2.5 days found a way to spend $190 Canadian, which is at least like $50 US, in Ubers. So unexpected, and it is cutthroat. I thought Canadians were nice. Like, our lady ran a red light the first night, and I was like, whoa. And then, you know, she swerved out of the way, and like somebody turning left while she was running a red honked at her, and then she pushed her hand on the horn as if she was going to honk back. And only the last minute thought better of it because she had a fare in the vehicle. So that was it was welcome to Toronto stuff. The speaker dinner the first night was a very cool experience. They invited not just speakers, but everyone on Rails Core and everyone who is on the issues team, the people responsible for responding to people who open issues up on GitHub, triaging all those requests, and then several other people who just try to make Rails great. And it was really neat to be in a larger setting. It was more like a mixer cocktail party. Yeah, it got to see a whole lot of friends, people I hadn't necessarily seen in a long time, people who are have contributed a lot and offered a lot to the community. Yeah, just a lot of old familiar faces. I had a lot of had a few funny interactions with, you know, people in the Ruby world, like Matt's. Matt's was there because he did a panel discussion with DHH on the first day of the conference, and he was extremely jet lagged, but his English is phenomenal, and his ability to communicate. You know, I'm jealous. I wish I was able to. If my Japanese was as good as his English, I'd be thrilled. You add jet lag on top, and I was able to help steer him just a little bit. I got to meet Toby, the founder and CEO at Shopify, and we had a really nice chat. Yeah, ran into most of the core team, I'd say. Yeah, it was a good time, and I like speaker dinners like that, in part because it's not because speakers are some other class of individual and like, oh, we're better than lay people who attend conferences. It's nothing at all like that. It's when you speak at a lot of conferences, those are the people that you see a lot because they also travel around speaking at conferences, right? Whereas like at most conferences, like a lot of the attendees are local, even though it might not feel that way or seem that way, or semi-local, right? Like the most reliable attendees are the speakers. And so these are a lot of people that I've seen dozens of times over the last 15 years. And so it was really nice in a concentrated setting to kind of get out of the way all the hi, how are yous with that group, so I could, you know, see them, catch up a little bit. And then what that allows me is the next day at the conference, I'm able to like actually focus on meeting new people and being fully present and not having to stiff arm or exclude anybody because, oh, hey, hold on, this Raphael's over here and I got to go and chat with him. No, I got to chat with Raphael the night before, that sort of stuff. Yeah, I don't know. The rest was just normal travel stuff. Hotel issues, got stuck in an elevator after a fire alarm at 2:30 in the morning. That was scary. We worked it out. I would have told that story here, but I think it would end me. I got adult onset claustrophobia, or at least that's what I'm telling myself, because I really cannot handle warm spaces with 16 people, and no promised end in sight for when I get to not be in a crowded space with 16 people. Skin crawl. The first day at the conference, I gave my final conference presentation, and I announced it near the beginning of the talk. I said, "Hey, begin with the end in mind," was the advice I was talking about, having shared with Becky, in designing her product. I decided while I was developing this particular talk that I had done everything that I wanted to do. I'd said everything that I'd wanted to say. And this was, in some ways, the talk, even though it contains a lot of fresh advice, and it executes certain motifs and things that I've been doing. It executes them at a higher level than I'd done before, which was great to flex that a little bit. But it really did feel like a victory lap of, as I was building it, I was like, yes, this is exactly as stressful as always. And then I ended up cutting more content than always. And then the day of, I had AV problems that were as bad or worse than I'd ever had, as always. It was almost like life reminding me of, the degree to which I had fully saturated myself in the experience of what it's like to craft a conference talk and to deliver it. And I had, every speaker has a different style. Some are storytellers, some speak through analogy, some don't use any visual aids at all. And me, I use them as a sort of symbiosis with me, the person, and my words. And so there's like a lot of them, right? So slide design is a big part of how I work. But I feel like I peaked. And I didn't just like peak like at Rails World last week. I peaked like a few years ago. COVID interrupted, I think, like what would have been. I probably would have wrapped sooner. But I wanted to kind of go out on a high note. I just didn't have anything left to say that was worth hogging up a spot that somebody else could speak. And I was putting myself through the same amount or more stress as ever because, a lot of thought leaders, they're able to, once they go to thought leader land, they're so full of themselves or whatever, or maybe they just got ice in their veins and I don't. They're able to just waltz up on stage and make some shit up or do the bare minimum amount of effort and just roll. But like for me, just like in how I approach work, like I did for Becky, like I did as a consultant, like 110% effort, maximum focus, any deviation, any distraction is a sin. It's depriving somebody of my best. And I'm going to fill every single fucking minute, making it as good as I can. So the ROI when I give a presentation then needs to be there. It needs to be like, what do I get out of this after a certain point? And just like I was talking about with Test Double, is like my continued presence also has a cost because there's only so many slots to speak. So if I'm just here for my own ego and I'm dragging myself and my family through 3 months of Justin being stressed out of his gourd to give a talk and figure out how to craft it so delicately, and now he's practicing it and he's always coming up. It's like a whole ordeal that I put other people through. And I'm also, holding somebody else back from whoever didn't get selected. And maybe, their talk would have been worse. But like a lot of my talks were pretty bad at first. And they were just good enough to not get me booed off stage. And for anyone who has the drive to keep improving, like they need the reps. And we don't have a lot of regional conferences anymore for people to get those reps. So a combination of those factors, right? Of the cost of input and the value of the output. I was like, you know what? Let's call it here. And let's not just keep that to myself. I didn't want to just, what a lot of my heroes did in Ruby. and at conferences generally, because I also did a lot of JavaScript conferences, is I would see them at conferences. I would, I'm thinking of people like, in the Ruby world, Avdi Grimm, Steve Klabnik, Katrina Owen, Sandy Metz, a whole lot of people, dozens of people. A lot of people I can't think of off the top of my head. And one of the reasons I can't think of them off the top of my head is that it's not that they affirmatively decided and announced that they were done. It's that they just stopped coming at some point. And if you missed one conference, it's like, oh yeah, I wonder where Chad went. I wonder where Rich is. Right? Then at the second conference that they're not there, you're on to the next thing, right? And then the third conference, and then pretty soon, oh yeah, that's just a thing that they used to do. And unless you have their contact information, you might never talk to them again. And even if you do, in some cases, I'm out of touch with a lot of those same people now, even trying to get back in touch. Life moves on. I wanted to make a clean break because I wanted to give other people the opportunity to think about not just me specifically, but like as time passes, like what are we doing here? What are you doing here? How does this have meaning to you right now? Will that amount of meaning be enhanced by me kind of, expressing like some degree of finality? Like, yeah, this is my last one. Please, I wish me luck. I hope it goes well. But also, the number of people who came up to me after this presentation who I was touched, and I did not expect this. I'm usually pretty good at predicting how people are going to react to things. I did not expect people to come up to me, basically processing their own emotions. It wasn't about me. It was about like them and like why they go to conferences or how they're going to like how what I said makes them feel like it's their turn now to step up and start speaking. A lot of younger folks said that. For a lot of older folks, it was a realization of like, oh shit, no one else ever said this. So clearly that they were done. And, they might feign like, oh, I don't believe you because you're addicted to this. And it's true. I've got, I've become addicted to attention, to a certain extent. And the feeling like the sort of like, people get good at what they do and people get habituated to what they do. And I'm making an affirmative decision to stop doing it. And it's going to come with a certain amount of commitment and a need for accountability to, keep me away from microphones, apart from this one that I'm speaking to right now. Stage-related microphones. Stage adjacent. They started thinking through it. It's like, oh yeah, those people are gone. Huh. And so I had like, a couple people tear up. Yeah, I don't know. If you weren't there, there's going to be a video coming up. I got a lot of emails the next day because Aaron tweeted and Instagrammed a couple comments that it was my last talk, and I gave him a heads up. He was the pretty much the only person who knew in advance, other than Becky and my brother. I gave him a heads up, and I'm actually glad he did because he went out of his way to take as many good pictures as he could, and he took some great pictures. I chose the topic, to speak about this app I made with Becky because I don't know when the next Rails application I'm going to build is. But when I look at the progression of my skills from literally after having started Testable to today, like I started Testable and I was barely competent in Rails, less than competent. My skill level was very, very weak in a lot of ways. I kind of snuck in the back JavaScript door in a lot of ways. And to see that I'm like not only able to make what I think is a banger of an application with very few bugs, with good stability, with a good UX, with a good design, all by myself, as the implementer by myself. To be able to do that and to stand on the shoulders of giants in the form of this wonderful framework in Rails, all of the tools that are kind of in our ecosystem, that a whole community of people build and support and maintain. I wanted to show off. I wanted to say, hey, look, like this is the trajectory of my career. This is how Rails has helped me become a stronger developer. And these are some of the lessons that I've learned along the way. Thanks for all the fish. Right. And as the talk sort of turned into that story, it just seemed really fitting. Uh, yeah, so it was about that. It's really about like a lot of key decisions and how I made the app. How Becky and I would develop a sort of a product owner to agile developer relationship, and how I would try to coach that without being too overbearing, because the thing that wouldn't have done any of us any good is for me to successfully just you know coerce her into believing that my way was the best way, actually, or the only way for something to work. And a lot of technologists do this when they're building stuff. It's like, oh, well, yeah, your ideas are really good, but like, sorry, this is just the way it works. And then that might get you over the short-term conversation of like, what do you do next? Like how does this one thing work, right? But when in aggregate, after the thing ships, that's how you end up with product owners and businesses where it's like, well, we paid for this whole thing, but it's like not at all what we wanted. And so coming back to the well, really like when she was like, overly deferential at times of, oh, well, this or that. I was like, no, like we are going to take a 2 hour long, 1 hour each way in the car to go look at tile in February or whatever. We're going to go look at this quartz for this bathroom remodel. And I'm going to spend the entire time talking about the data model. And we are going to argue about what word we use for stuff. And she found that excruciating because she hadn't had that experience before. But it was necessary for me to get in her head a little bit and understand not only what she wanted the app to do, but how she thinks about her service offering and how to best translate that into something that was delivered as a SaaS product. And I'm glad I did. It was a good experience. It was hard. So yeah, it's about that. A mix of technical stuff and just general advice. The talk itself, like I could do a deleted scenes of this thing that would be as long. It was a 30-minute slot and I had to cut so much. I had to cut at least 35% of the talk, probably closer to half. But I've got a solid 35% that I could just go and, invert which slides are skipped right now and do a screencast that would probably take me 30 minutes to get through. And maybe I'll do it. Don't threaten me with a good time, because there's a lot of good stuff in there. Pro tips on solid queue, examples of other stimulus controllers that I wrote, Stripe checkout, and like why we ended up choosing that as the payment tool, and as opposed to building our own, API integration with custom UI. I'm glad that doing something as complex as a conference talk that is guided by slide visuals, that's going to have like that was born from like, I think I had over 800 notes, like individual to-dos that I had logged over the course of the 6 months that I've been thinking about giving this presentation. When you have that many inputs and you keep going back and like outlining over and over and over and over again, I probably did 15 different outlines for the talk, just extemporaneously. I'd sit down, I'd spontaneously decide with my iPad, my pencil, or pen and paper, and I would just draw out what I thought the talk was. And I went through all these different silly variations and metaphors and ways to structure it. And you what you do is you take a bundle of ideas and you kind of try them on like clothes. You say, well, I take these 3 points over here and I put those and I call that under this category, right? Like I had one that was like personas, like this is like the explorer, and this is the I feel like, sure, a sense of ownership over talks, but less than writing for whatever reason, less than spoken word, because it does feel like a Ouija board after a certain point. It feels like, no, there is a underlying truth here, and you're going to approximate it almost like Newtonian physics models, basic, acceleration and movement of objects in like a, constant amount of gravity. Like, it's not going to be a perfect description of how the physics underlying it works, but it is going to be a reflection of some kind of truth, an imperfect one. And that the talk ended up here, I'm kind of glad for, because I think it's it's timely. It's trying to make the case that Rails is a framework that can be used by one person to build an app that is a full stack, effective, production grade, real piece of software, is a message that I think is worth sharing because it's very counter the last 10, 12 years of the industry, where including many of these big Rails companies have like hired thousands of developers for products that were almost already pretty well defined, well implemented, or already built. So having some proof of like, here's what one person can do. Yes, that person was, experienced already, right? Like a new developer wouldn't be able to crank that out, but a new developer could get something working. I guarantee it. So I'm glad it ended up there. There was a chance that it would have ended up in a much more, I think, self-aggrandizing place of, oh, well, this is why you're dumb if you have teams, or if you have you got a whole bunch of waste in your organization. You should just fire a bunch of people and just have like a few rock stars building stuff. Like, that's not what my heart says, and I don't think there's a lot of truth there. But I started with some of that energy. I started with some of that like, fuck you, like, yeah, look at me, woo, energy. I don't know why, but I was feeling spicy. This is dating back in May or whatever, June, when I was first thinking about this. I'm glad I didn't end up there, and in part because I think where the facts and the experiences led me is like, it's not about how many people. It's about when you optimize for productivity, when you create something that is so lithe, so free of superfluity, so organized around maintaining a focus from beginning to end of an entire feature without having to tab away or juggle multiple dependencies or runtime contexts or whatever it is. When you optimize for developer productivity, which is, I think, the number one thing that Rails is always optimized for, and in a programming language, Ruby, which Mats is always optimized for programmer happiness and expressiveness, the fact that you can do a shitload as one individual are consequences of that. Is a consequence of those things, right? If you're focused on, look, I think it just naturally follows that if happiness at the language level and productivity and focus at the framework level are the two things being optimized for, what do those things have in common? But they cannot be conveyed between people via communication. I can't say I'm happy and then make you happy. I can't be focused and say be focused and make you focused. So there's no extra lift to adding people to a project where happiness and focus are the coin of the realm. Now, if you happen to be on a team with a whole bunch of very happy, very focused people, I'm sure you'd have a great time and I'm sure you'd get a lot done. But the tool isn't solving for that, right? Like, that has to come from some other place, which is one reason why I think if you use these tools, it makes really good sense to also have a real high empathy, give a shit level about, the work you do, which is, now this is going to sound self-aggrandizing because I don't mean to equate myself to the Mats and DHH, these luminaries, but like an agency like Test Double is a third leg of the stool, right? If happiness and focus are the first two, how do we scale that beyond just one person? Well, here's an agency of people who are really, really good at connecting humans to have better experiences at work, to get along better as teams, to find consensus on the things that matter, and how to collaborate hand in glove every step of the way so that there's no surprises and less conflict. So yeah, when you put it that way, now like that's an interesting story. It's not the story I told because I was focused on what is the outcome of this happiness and focus, like optimization. And the outcome is me, even as one person, can get stronger in all these other ways. I can flex my muscles in all these different ways and have this effect, reach this result. thanks only to these tools, right? It's simple but hard, and it really helps. So, yeah, I don't know. That was it. Uh, there were other good talks. I've been going long enough already on this conference. I know if you're not interested, you're probably wishing I had chapters in this thing so you could skip ahead. There were a lot of other good talks. A lot of the production quality was very high throughout. Really well run event. If you haven't been to either the previous two, I would strongly recommend you try to get into the next one. I know the tickets sell quickly. I was very impressed. Amanda Perino, she's the executive director at Rails Foundation, is an absolute champ and was solicitous of my toughest feedback and critique. And then I gave her some compliments, and she's like, yeah, but keep giving me the stuff that's going to drive us forward, which is something I don't have. I only, I output salt. I can't intake it. These are exhaust fumes that you're hearing from me. So if somebody were to give me as much tough feedback as I gave her about legitimate and several illegitimate, critiques and issues, I would be catatonic, and I would have been completely unable to continue in the role, much less, get up and say, all right, come at me. Like, well, I'll do what I can in my control, but keep moving forward. And even, just seeing her work made it click of like, yes, like, she's got a lot of skills outside of event organization, but like applied to this particular trade, like it was, I'll say, a breath of fresh air, right? Like it's just, really well run. Every function of the conference, even the ones that had issues, was just executing at a very high level. So that's great. It's great for Rails. It's, normally you only see conferences that are this like impressive if they're backed by a massive vendor. Like the closest, the most similar conference that I've been to is probably GitHub Universe, which is like a GitHub Microsoft corporate, heavily, sponsored and backed event in San Francisco, where there's a lot of marketing budget there, right? And their events team is like, working full time on it for a long time. And it's a big corporate priority. It's not a community affair. So that's, I'm very grateful that I had the opportunity to give one last talk in front of some people. And I'm very glad that so many of you people listening were there to share it with me. And had so many awesome chats that day, the next day. Came home to some very, very touching emails, and I appreciate all of it. On another level, though, like, let's be honest, like the conference format of you go to a conference and then you sit through 12 talks over 2 days, that seems to have that made way more sense to me before streaming HD video was ubiquitous. I started speaking in 2009. That's post YouTube, but barely YouTube on iPhones, right? It's like, what was it, right? 30,000 videos getting posted a day total. The format made a lot more sense when there was a scarcity of high bandwidth communication. Like, this isn't actually all that related to why I decided this should be my final talk. It's criticism that I've heard before, and in situations where I would only be attending and not speaking, I've felt this before, but I'm like, a lot of these talks could have been, first of all, like a README on a documentation page. A lot of them would have been better 10-minute YouTube videos that had like, better visual support, visual aids. And I don't think it's why people come to conferences, is to sit in these talks. Usually it's to meet with people. And the best thing that a great talk can do is stimulate conversation about the talk, between other people, get people thinking. If you were to do an event today in the world we live in now, my hope is it would be more like a forum. Hey, everyone come and have a position paper on this general discipline or topic. And we'll have some sort of, process for voting and selecting and then kind of opening a floor and having group discussions or workshop. There's a million different games you can play and tools you can use to facilitate communication and collaboration in like large group settings. Like if you got a whole bunch of people in the room that share a common skill set and industry and set of values, like that can be really, really valuable stuff. And more like, what I like experiences where you get out of it what you put into it, right? You phone it in and you don't try very hard and you don't make an effort and you only sit with people that you already know from your current job. You're going to have a limited upside. All right. Well, I guess that's it. Yeah. So like, what do we cover today? I done with the app. I got a lot of free time now. Why do I have free time? Well, I just finished this big talk, just finished this big app, and I'm gonna figure out what I'm gonna do now. Now that I've kind of shared my heart and soul with you, I'm gonna subject you to one of Aaron's worst puns. And I say that with love. I don't know that it's one of his worst puns, but we're going to figure out where it is on the chart because I'm going to rank it out of 20. There have been 20 puns so far, one for each version of Breaking Change. If you're new to the podcast, Aaron supplies a free pun with every episode. That is the Cracker Jack toy in the bottom of this box. He texts it to me using invisible ink. So I haven't read it. I've been watching it squiggle around. When I highlight it with my mouse, I will be able to read it. And then once I read it, I will rank it along the other puns. So here we go. All right. Well, context. Aaron lives in Seattle. And he writes, I've never been in a hurricane, but I heard it blows. I've never been in a hurricane, but I heard it blows. If that was any shorter, that would be like a Laffy Taffy joke. There's a popsicle somewhere where the popsicle stick has that joke written on it, or some variation of it. I haven't been in a hurricane, but I heard it blows. That's not like... That is completing the assignment. That is wordplay. It is, timely. It is timely in the sense that I'm now sandwiched between two hurricanes. And he sent this on September 29th, so he didn't even know about the second one. But it's also timeless. Like some of his puns barely make sense today, and a few years from now, people will be like, what's that referencing? So I think it's definitely better than those. Let's pull up the scoreboard here and see where this ranks. First, I'm going to copy this down. Selecting text in iMessage is never easy, but when it's an invisible ink thing, it'll actually still disappear again once you've undisappeared it. Okay, this is definitely a middle of the pack. I'm looking at number 10. Aren't progressive web apps just liberal media? I don't think that one. I think that one's better. 11. My feet really hurt from walking, so I decided to switch to meat meters. I think that one's classic, but also potentially underrated. So number 12. Current like 12 ranked. I heard camera stores are always having a flash sale. And then 13 is like a paragraph long. Yeah, I'm gonna put this at the new 13. So it's just behind version 20s. And that is the new 13th best pun that Aaron has submitted so far to this program. I've never been in a hurricane, but I heard it blows. So thank you, Aaron, for your contribution to society. Your efforts are appreciated. And yeah, if you have a pun, you can write it in to podcast@searls.co. And I won't read it on the podcast, but I'll read it. And I might even comment. Because puns are a violence that we commit on one another. And what I'm really doing is inviting you to, if you have to get it off your chest, you can write it to me. So, open invitation. Well, I try to do one of these more than just every 3 weeks. There's been 3 weeks. So this is a lot of news is piled up. So we're going to try to be efficient here in getting through some of these old stories. First one that I want to call attention to is one of the EU commissioner folks, Thierry Breton. I don't know how to pronounce fancy people's names, was on the European Commission, wrote a kind of nasty Graham resignation letter saying that he was trying his best to fight for people, but he's no longer able to. So he was forced out. And the reason this is relevant to anything in sort of the sphere of shit I care about is it is sure seeming like Apple's hardball strategy of withholding new features that people would like to use, like Apple Intelligence, from Europe based on the, uncertainty of how it would be regulated or how the existing regulations, which delegate a ton of executive authority to the bureaucratic commissions. So like the way that the DMA, the Digital Markets Act, is written, is there's so much wiggle room that even when Apple designs a solution that fits the letter of the law, the commissioners would come back and say, well, it doesn't fit the spirit of the law. So we're going to fine you gajillion dollars anyway if you don't do this. Which, look, when that happened, there were a lot of people who were excited to see that happen because they're like, God damn it, damn straight. Like, you shouldn't have all these loopholes and you should hold people accountable to have to follow through and like do the thing. Problem is, once you set the precedent, it's almost like you live in like an extra legal framework, right? The nice thing about laws is that they actually say what they do on the tin. And in America, that's always been, I think the understanding of the American legal system is like, if if the law says it, that's what it is. And of course, around everything that we ever hear about in terms of federal law cases, like the Supreme Court and whatnot, almost all those cases until like relatively recent history with increased politicization of the Supreme Court, like almost all that's like handling real weird edge cases and interpretations of statute that are very, very fine grained. But in general, 99.9% of behavior that people and companies do is pretty clearly in or out of, is either legal or not. Once the commissioner said, oh, well, yes, it might follow the letter of the law, but not the spirit, so we're going to fine you anyway and make you go do this again. What it means is that without pre-clearance, without them like literally writing Apple a note and saying we expressly, we will warrant that it is okay for you to release this technology in Europe, and we will not force you to do X, Y, or Z. Right. So, for example, like one of the features in macOS Sequoia is that you can stream your iPhone. It's like the iPhone is a dock item by default now, and you can just click that, and then boom, it's your phone screen. And all your notifications are mirrored, and they're actionable. So you click on a notification. If it was from a phone app, it'll like launch looks like a simulator window of your phone. And you can like dick around on your phone from your Mac, which is probably bad from a focus and productivity perspective, but a cool feature. But the way, if you read the Digital Markets Act as, well, the iPhone is a gatekeeper platform, which means that Apple needs to provide APIs for all the other, providers of mobile devices or whatever. Well, now, the very tight integration between a lot of proprietary Apple technologies, MDNS, the high bandwidth, high performance screen sharing that they built for the Vision Pro is probably also being reused here. And that's running on both devices. So coming up with an open source protocol so that Android could be have the same thing. And then so in Europe, you'd install Mac OS and you'd get like a ballot of, do you want to have the iPhone in the dock for the screen mirroring or an Android device or any of these other 11 devices that you've never heard of, right? If that's where it's going to go and Apple's going to be forced before they can release this without being fined, like, it would be better for them to withhold the feature. Same goes for Apple Intelligence, same goes for anything. And so it's not, is it spiteful and is it a way to get leverage over these assholes? Sorry, everyone. I'm showing my hand here. From their perspective, like, yeah, it absolutely is, because they think that they should have agency over the products that they build. But like, the reason that like I'm really glad this guy was forced out, and the reason I thought like what I want like good regulations that are clearly written. The problem is, like, of course, what we have is the US, where like getting any kind of regulation passed is impossible, and that is, in my opinion, bad. And in Europe, we're getting like, because they don't have a tech industry, and Spotify, which barely makes any money, hardly counts as a tech industry. Because Europe doesn't have a tech sector, they are regulating the companies so intensely and in such a draconian manner that like there's a happy medium here, which is just like write a law that says, hey, you got to like let people install apps from other places, and this is what counts and this is what doesn't count, right? And that's what, like, I think people cheering on the pro-Europe side here, like, that's what they want. But the truth is that by going so much further and saying that, look, we're going to have this extra legal commission basically tut you, at this point, even if like the European Commission were to give Apple a letter and say, look, you are hereby granted, like, you can do the Apple Intelligence and we're not going to do a rug pull and make you, open it up, open source it tomorrow. Or make it a common endpoint that any other AI assistant can just take your phone over and read all your contacts or something. Even if they wrote that letter, Apple wouldn't believe it, because then part of the line of thinking that gets you to, well, laws, like, what the letter of the law doesn't count if the spirit isn't met and I am the sole arbiter of the spirit. That same line of reasoning gets you to, well, that letter that I wrote you a year ago is about Apple Intelligence as it exists then. From where I'm standing now, our opinions have shifted and now we're going to do all the things, right? So like, short of like a law that says like anything that they say has to be held in perpetuity, right? I don't know how they unfuck this, to be honest. And so, people don't upgrade their phones every year, right? For the population of Europe to get like sufficiently angry about this, it might need to be 2, 3, 4 years out. But there's a chilling effect that companies way smaller than Apple are going to see in Europe, and they're going to probably make similar decisions about how they go to market there. So if 3 or 4 years from now, like the experience of computing is way worse for most users in Europe, it'll probably trickle up to the European Parliament, and then they'll change the law, right? I just don't see how this goes any other way, because Europe's they're 7% of Apple's revenue. It's just not enough to reorient the entire engineering culture of the company, especially if it's going to create a slippery slope. You look at Japan, however, and like Japan just passed their own, hey, you got to let people install apps law, and it's like a normal ass law. And it'll probably use a lot of the same Apple will reuse a lot of the same guts here. But there's probably going to be less acrimony, because it'll probably just be like, fine. So there you go. That's the DMA update, yada, yada. IA Writer, which is if you've never used IA Writer before, I think it's IA stands for Information Architects, I want to say. I might have made that up. But they years ago made a Mac and then iPhone like focused writing environment with a focus mode that just focuses on one sentence at a time. It's got a full screen mode. It's very attuned to how I like to write, which is big, bold text, one thought at a time. And they had a version for Android apparently that like they can't update it. The reason is that to update the app, Google is now requiring anyone who accesses your Google Drive, like if your app uses Google Drive permissions to save documents in Google Drive, right? Just like it does for iCloud Drive, you have to pay a third-party auditor, like an Ernst & Young or a KPMG, to audit your code and ensure that you're not doing anything untoward with people's data in Google Drive. Now, from Google's perspective, they can tout that this is a privacy protecting policy, that Apple doesn't require this, that it makes sure that people's security is taken care of by all these third parties. And if you're a small company like IA Writer, you're not going to pay KPMG tens of thousands of dollars every year to audit your source code, right? And so basically the Android app is just stuck. They're not going to update it. And again, talk about chilling effect. Like this is a case of, hey, Google had this really nice API for a long time and I used it. And the Google's solution to solving privacy was not lock down and re-architect and design Google Drive to not allow like data leaking. So the reason that you would need this audit is if Google Drive isn't securely designed, right? Google, Android, the Google services, they don't have the same degree of sandboxing that the iPhone app system has. So when an iPhone app, when an iPhone app is looking at its files, at the file system, it only sees this like tiny, narrow little made up kind of virtual window of a file system. It can't see anything the apps next to it is doing, any of its files. And when it asks you to like save something in iCloud, unless you go and do a file picker and you're just in the normal file manager to your own thing, it stores the files in a little folder that's dedicated to just that app. And that's tied to the bundle ID and that app developer. So like it literally couldn't go and reach around and do nefarious shit with other data because Apple architected the system to not allow that to happen. And so on one hand, like people get mad because Apple's too constraining, right? It's like, oh, well, this whole class of applications can't exist because you can't do this and the sandboxing, and people complain about it, especially on the Mac. But like Google, instead of just fixing Google Drive and applying this level of sandboxing to so things would be secure and private by default, is instead putting the onus on the individual software developers to audit and to test that their code is right. And like, I don't know if you read a lot of code, but those audits aren't going to be reliable, right? You could obfuscate shit. It's just all security theater. And the net effect is that you're going to have fewer and even weaker ecosystem of software available for Android users. So Google, stop being lazy, please. Figure it out. Somebody wrote a long series of essays. Leopold Aschenbrenner, June 2024. So it's a few months old. Called Situational Awareness, the Decade Ahead. It is written from the perspective of someone who seems to be a very smart guy, talking to a lot of very smart AI guys, who is unfortunately, I think, playing the role of, I'm not as smart as these guys, they seem pretty smart, but still, I'm just an outsider. But like, still, he's like very inside. He's like a little too inside. But if you want to pull back the curtain of what people in AI land are thinking and saying and what they think the next 10 years looks like, boy, this is a real read. It's basically small book length. It is a lot. Breaks down what he thinks and what he hears other people saying that they think about like what we can expect in terms of functional improvements to artificial intelligence over the next decade. And it's not an advocacy thing. So it's not like accelerationist. It's not saying, hey, we need to do this, right? It's not a position paper. It's just saying like, look, this is where, if you extrapolate all these lines the way that they seem to be going now, this is where we end up. And and taken that way, it is an incredibly optimistic read on where AI will be from the sense of how far the technology will progress. It is chilling. It is sobering how different the world would be 10 years from now if all this plays out this way. And that, the nature of predictions is not everything's going to play out this way. There's going to be a lot of surprises along the way, and we're going to look back and be like, oh, wow, shit, didn't expect this part to happen. But on the technology level, like if even half this shit comes to pass, humanity is going to have to figure out answers to a lot of hard questions really quickly at a time when half of the world can't write laws and the other half has kind of gone so far in the other direction, the letter of the law doesn't matter anymore, which is not where you want to be from a regulatory competence perspective when we've got a tech industry that is possibly going to be redefining the definition of intelligence and reorganizing how information is consumed and distributed in the world. So yeah, that's a little bit of a bummer. So I'm not going to recap all of it here. I think it's not a brisk read exactly, but it's digestible. It's not like a paper. It's meant to be read by normies. And so I wanted to share that link. It's called Situational Awareness. He feels strongly enough about it that he bought a domain name, right? Situational-awareness.ai if you want to go and check it out. I was scrolling Reddit. I don't know why. It was late at night, and I was like, you know what? I haven't looked at Reddit in a while. Scrolling Reddit, and the IBM subreddit had a post titled, "Why are any of us still here? IBM is dying and we know it." And, apparently the subreddit is mostly employees. And I guess that would make sense because it's not like there's such a thing as IBM fans anymore. There are ThinkPad fans, but hell, I mean, Lenovo bought the consumer facing computer line so long ago that I don't even know how many people listening to this even think of the ThinkPad as an IBM computer. Yeah, so basically the theory of the case here from this employee or former employee is like, consulting is our biggest revenue stream. It has been for a long time. And most of what consulting does is charge a high hourly rate to enterprise customers to glue legacy IBM systems to the modern internet and to integrate tools that should, in theory, be modern systems with normal APIs that you can just kind of plug in much more painlessly. But there's a perverse incentive where not doing that generates way more revenue because $300 an hour is like a good rate. And the enterprise customers are all captured by IBM because like they built their business on DB2 40 years ago and now they're just fucking stuck. So it's true, right? It's obviously true that that's where IBM makes a lot of its money. And it's all that perverse incentive is very apparent. And if you look at like recent service offerings in terms of their cloud play and what they call AI or Watson and how most of it is white labeled other people's stuff, he's got a good point. So a year ago, I was telling people to sell their Intel stock because I didn't understand why the share price was higher than $0. And people got mad at me. And then one of them reached out and said, okay, fine. You were right. I should have sold my Intel stock. I would... reading this makes me bearish on IBM's prospects. Because they also, they've got a chest full of patents. But even those are really fucking old at this point. I don't know how many are active that would even be worth it. So you look at how many assets they've got. They've got a couple of vanity projects like quantum computing stuff, but a lot of that's in like partnership with research like laboratories and universities. And it's not exactly just like right over the horizon. So I'll share that thread if anyone has thoughts. Maybe I'm the only one who finds this shit interesting, but it's definitely the juxtaposition of sort of like old tech passing away and current tech trying to pivot so fucking hard with what the next generation might be the wrong term, although AI companies are full of lots of young people. The next wave of tech startups, the world that they are envisioning. It's wild to me that, when I started my career, I was talking about earlier today in 2007, like all of our projects, almost all of them had somebody from IBM on the project team, either subcontracted through my company or like as sort of like the blend at the client, right? Because I was doing a lot of technologies that were, part of the IBM ecosystem. And if I were to look them up now, like FileNet or whatever, like I suspect that none of them got updates again after IBM acquired them, and that they're all just rotting at, Jobs and Family Services in Ohio or wherever it was. All right. Moving right along. Big news, of course, that I'm a little late to the party to now here as I record on October 6th. You may not have heard, but Apple released new watches and iPhones. And if you had an iPhone 15 Pro and I put a 16 Pro in your pocket and you pulled it out, the only thing you would notice is probably that it was a little bit heavier, but just a little bit. Oh, that's a little bit heavier. And if I told you, hey, that's actually a different phone, you'd look at it, you'd squint, and then the only other thing you'd probably make out is that it has this camera control button for taking pictures. The phone is a very, very incremental update this year. However, if you're looking for reasons to upgrade, I think the camera control button is great. I love it. It is fiddly. It's, it'll get better with software, but I like where they're going with it. I like that it prioritizes taking horizontal facing fucking pictures. Because I like when pictures and videos go sideways because it matches the aspect ratio of my eyeballs. If I had vertically aligned eyeballs, I would definitely enjoy more vertical video, but that's just not the shape of my eyeballs. I don't know about the shape of your eyeballs, but there's a reason why we have widescreen movies, and it's because we have widescreen vision, for fuck's sake. Other reason, battery life is way better. So the batteries, if you look at the milliamp hours, iFixit's done the teardowns now, and they know it's 6-7% bigger batteries across the line, but that's equating with the new processor on the second generation 3 nanometer process that TSMC is printing wafers of. The real world improvement to battery life across the phone lineup is 20 to 40%. 20% in the non-Pro phones, 30 something for the Pro, and then 40% more for the Pro Max, which turns it into a 2-day product. Because I had the 15 Pro Max, and that thing was easily a day. I could go a day and a half with how little I use that phone. Because I'm just not a big phone user throughout the day. But I am a big watch user, and the new Watch Series 10. If you've been on an Ultra because you wanted the big screen with the best battery, if you've been on an Ultra because you wanted to be able to have a full keyboard, if you wanted the temperature sensor in the water and the depth sensor, if you wanted the latest and greatest features, and that was why you were on an Ultra and not because you're a fucking Sahara Desert marathon distance runner, or a professional scuba diver, you probably want to sell the Ultra, I want to say, and then go and get a Series 10 Apple Watch. So I did that. It is way thinner. It is way lighter. It sits closer to the wrist. I got the jet black one because it's. I always regretted not getting the jet black iPhone 7, and I'm looking at it now, and it makes me regret that even more because it's so fucking beautiful. It looks like a single piece of onyx, and the screen almost just bleeds right over the side into it. So the bezels are tighter. It's a almost a 2-inch screen in a 46 millimeter height case. So it's like the bigger model now is much more square than it was before, which was like a little bit more vertical. Because it fits closer to the skin, I noticed that like when I'm running the new Watch Series 10, my wrist heats up faster because you got the sensors going against it, right? They're measuring, well, not blood oxygen in the US, but they're measuring heart rate. And there's just like no airflow there. Whereas like there's like a very prominent bump when you have the Ultra. It sits high on the wrist. Here it's so close, like that my wrist actually gets a little bit warm. I can't tell if it's from the device or just because when I'm out jogging, I mean. So that's like, but it's a huge improvement. It's like it's so much lighter. It's so much more comfortable, especially after 2 years of Ultra life. And the battery is phenomenal. Well, I had to stop mid-sentence. The battery on the second one that I have here is phenomenal. Becky and Jeremy and we're living the Ultra life, and then we all traded in and got the Series 10. And they were reporting that their battery life was awesome, and I was struggling. Like I first 3 or 4 days, it was like 8%, 9. And since then, 18.0.1 has been released and apparently has addressed a battery drain issue. Maybe that's what it was. I don't know. Maybe I just like lost the battery lottery and I got a shitty battery. But it was so bad that after about 7 or 8 days, I was like, you know what? I'm going to return this. And so I returned it and just bought another one. Could I have called support and said, hey, my battery is bad and gone through the support channel? Yes. Did I do that? Fuck no. Do you know how hard it is to like prove that your battery is bad when the diagnostics are not saying that the battery is bad? I would have just been talking to them. Oh, well, it's only 3 cycles. And so obviously that's not it. The battery health report's 100%. I'm sorry, there's nothing we can do. No, get bent. Like, look at how many hours I'm getting on this thing. Like, look at the little chart and how it drops off precipitously. And this is like a brand new Apple Watch that is not restored from backup. Like, come on. So easier than that is just figure out if you like the product within 14 days. And if it feels like you got a lemon, then return it. So that's what I did. And then I got the second one, set it up from the backup of the one that I just turned in. And even before 18.0.1 landed, battery life is remarkable. Absolutely incredible. So pro tip, if you ever get something with a lithium battery in it, and you have a return policy, use it. Please. I'm learning as I get older that a lot of people are just afraid of ever using a return, like they're individually stealing from a company or something, or hurting somebody's feelings, or some salesperson's not going to get the commission. Like, that's not how any of this works. Like, the policy is there. If you're not happy, use it. Other cultures don't have generous return policies, but in America, for whatever reason, we've been able to collectively negotiate that we deserve good return policies. And I can tell you, like, when you don't have one, it fucking sucks. When I was in Japan and we were like trying to furnish an entire home, I learned in a hurry, it's like, oh yeah, like some things might technically be returnable, but it's really, really hard. And like a lot of things that you buy are, buyer beware kind of stuff. So I walked into that year of being a homemaker thinking, oh yeah, like this is great. I'll just, put it on the charge card and furnish the house and return anything we don't need. And then go to the store and be like, they're like, what do you mean return? Sorry, all sales are final here. I'm like, oh, fuck. It's not true of everything, but like, it made me very grateful for the fact that we can return stuff here. And then one day you return too much stuff and Amazon just bans your account forever because apparently that's how that works. But the optimal number of things to return is one less than whatever it takes for you to get banned from everything. Of course, only return something if it doesn't work. Come on. But I am all that to say, I'm very glad that I'm on my second Apple Watch. The iPhone, on the other hand, worked right out of the box. And the first time that I left the house, I got in the car and I drove to a spot nearby. I spent a couple hours there, got back in the car, it was sunny, looked at the phone, and there was a big fucking crack right down the middle of the screen. Not like phones get scratched, right? I said crack. It is a scratch. Legally, it is a scratch. I have to say that. But it's such a deep scratch, and it's so vertical, and it's so perfectly straight that it almost looks like the screen cracked in half. And it's like 3 inches long. It's right at the top. So you're starting an article. The first thing you see is that little rainbowy like line, and it is so apparent. It's so depressing, and it just happened. I had no idea what touched it. I mollycoddle the thing. Wasn't in there with my keys. I don't know, man. So depressing. I chose not to return it. I've got Apple Care. I'm on the iPhone upgrade program. If the phone gets damaged in some other way, I'll just, execute one of my Apple Care uses and return it or get it swapped. But man, that is depressing. Maybe the reason that I'm happy about the phone is that this was the first time since, thinking back to 2019, pre-2019, I always did a fresh iOS install, not from backup. So I'd had the wild, debauched summer of beta life, which, in early years, like iOS 5 literally bricked the device to the point that the DFU mode wouldn't activate and they had to literally replace my phone. Betas are more stable now. And then after that would happen, I'd be like, well, these betas would just fuck up all of the data on my device anyway. So I don't want to try to, roll forward that crap. I just want to start fresh. But then in 2019, after going to Japan and having a Japanese cell phone number and Japanese ID card and a whole lot of like banking and other applications that were dependent, my authentication depended on having access to those or even being inside the country or whatever. I just did not have it in me to figure out how to get back into them or how to reset passwords or reset that auth for the fact that like, oh, I'm back in America and I don't have that phone number anymore, but I still would like, my $300 worth of points from Edeon, electronics store. So I spent the next 4 years, updating devices, doing the device to device transfer, and increasingly just watching my phone become a buggy ass mess because I'm me and I can't help it. So this year I decided to rip off the Band-Aid and I was like, you know what? I'm just going to start absolutely fresh. And I'm so glad I did. I'm almost pissed that this resolved so many bugs because like the thing that Apple support would tell you, or even like other like Apple Roddy in the sort of podcast ecosystem, is like, oh, well, you might have a couple, like maybe a rogue process or something, or a particular application or a corrupt configuration somewhere, and that might cause 1 or 2 year issues, but most of the stuff's going to be in the cloud. And when you actually restore the device, the operating system gets reflashed and yada yada. It is night and it's like I'm using a different goddamn operating system than what I'd gotten used to after just four models of dragging local settings and configuration forward. Like it's pretty. If you're not happy with your phone, I strongly recommend. Now, if you're going to start fresh, and the little setup wizard doesn't want you to do this, you have to really tell it, no, I'm not going to migrate data. Just set me up fresh. I log into iCloud right away, and then I let it start fresh, and then I just put it on a charger and set it on an ice pack, and I leave it be for 48 hours. Seriously, I'll activate it, but then I'll just let it sit. It's like you're gonna have some syncing time. And then when I came back to it, now I had all the iCloud shit was synced. That stuff, like the processor was not running hot anymore. And what I did next was I started some shitty TV show that I only half cared about, some like reality TV So less than half cared about. And popped in my headphones, and I spent like 3.5 hours with 15 Pro in my left hand and 16 Pro in my right hand. And I just went app by app by app, installed each app from the first phone to the second. Once all the apps were installed, I opened one at a time. So the first app I do is 1Password, so I have the ability to log into all the other apps. And then I went in one app at a time, logged into every single one of them that I could, and indeed, it turned out that a lot of these apps from Japan had been logged out at some point that I had been dragging forward. So I couldn't get into them anyway. And then manually configuring every single app just how I like it. And in the process, I would know, maybe 40% of these apps, I never use this, and so I wouldn't install those, right? And then I would go through, after I had done all of that, then go through the system settings and go through every single fucking pane of the increasingly labyrinthian settings app. And that there too, I found a whole lot of little surprises of, oh man, I must have set this at some point and that got carried forward, and now that setting's called this and it's translated this way. I don't want that on. And so I probably only actually re-enabled about a third of the settings that were customized on the first time around. In general, again, we talk about trade-offs and talk about costs. Whenever you pick a custom setting, you are incurring two kind of costs. One cost is that by not being on the default, the switching cost to picking up somebody else's device and being able to use it, that goes up, right? Put differently, the switching cost to starting fresh on a new computer, that goes up. And so it makes it a little bit more sticky, and it makes it feel more like, I gotta preserve this backup and keep on dragging all this junk from device to device, which is as you can see, a cost if things get worse over time. The experience gets worse, if things get buggy. Whereas if you play the game by all default settings, then it doesn't matter at all. You can start up a new Mac fresh or a new iPhone fresh, and you'd be basically fine. But the other cost that you incur, and again, people don't think about this very much, is your QA, right? Your QA at Apple, and your job is to QA the Photos app. Well, all of your test scripts will start off with a default configuration of the Photos app, and you will, go through, and if you're manual, you'll go through and check all the boxes and click all the buttons and make sure they do the right thing. And if it's an automated QA task, if it's an automated test, it'll do the same thing, the equivalent fake clicks and fake reads of what's on the screen. Well, that's going to, by default, most of those scripts are going to use the default settings, right? And then you'll have other tests for, and if this setting is this, let's run it through this battery of tests. It is very unusual, and Apple has proven time and again that they are not hyper sophisticated when it comes to automated testing and QA. It is highly unusual for a company like that to actually test the cross product of every single option against every other option. And so from a combinatorial perspective, you just think of the math. If you've got 35 fucking settings, and let's say 15 are Booleans, that's 2 to the 15 times, let's say 10 are, I forgot how many settings I said overall, 10 have 4 different options. Well, then that's 4 to the 10th, 4 times 4 times 4 times 4. And pretty soon, you've got, it does not take a lot of options to have an absolutely impossible number of permutations of settings. And it's true that most settings, most configuration options don't have any real opportunity in a given code path to intersect or to impact one another. So the sheer number of permutations isn't a risk per se, but that risk goes up when the thing that the app does is work on your data, because that's typically a shared state where it's this, yes, this feature only affects HDR, and that other option that you picked only affects what photo style you have. Well, both of those they might not ever run in the code at the same time, but they're both operating on the exact same fucking piece of data. And so unless you rigorously test, it's if I change this metadata over here, it's not going to fuck up the lighting data over here in this other way. That cost of customizing your options very, aggressively is instead of being paid for by QA or by an automated test that runs all the time, that cost is being paid by you, because you are now the beta tester. You are the canary in the coal mine. And when that shit doesn't work for you and you call support, and then support figures out that it's because you have these 3 different things all checked, and then that turns into a radar issue and some ticket somewhere that goes back to the team, who then ignores it because they're focused on the next operating release. So there's a virtue in minimizing the amount of deviations from defaults that you'd select, which incidentally is also like my own philosophy about how to develop software, and why a lot of what my talk was at Rails World about, like, here's why all the vanilla options are really good. And when they're not the best, they're still good. If they're good enough, they're good enough, and stick with them, because they're going to be supported for forever. And you don't have to become the maintainer of a custom framework of the 55 different random tools that you've selected to bolt onto this thing. In one case, I started using the 1Password. So 1Password 7, which is the old version of 1Password that predates their kind of mandatory SaaS product offering. It offered syncing on other services, like you could sync your passwords on iCloud Drive or on Dropbox. New 1Password 8 only allows the syncing service from 1password.com, so it's like tightly coupled. And that's a consequence of how they get their funding and also how they charge for the app. Whatever, that's fine. I don't like it. I don't like it on the Mac for sure because it's an Electron app. I don't like it on the iPhone because the UX is slower and I have to click things more and I have to tap more things to get what I want done. And when I search, things don't show up as fast. But the thing that I really grinds my gears about the new 1Password on the phone, you can still go back and install the old one. I just was lazy, and because I wasn't going from backup, I just searched 1Password in the App Store, and so you get the new one. When you set up a new device, it used to be the case that it would read some little data in iCloud, and it'd be like, oh, you already have a 1Password.com account set up, and so just click this one button and type in your password. They removed that for some reason. And so now if I want to set up another device, I need either to scan a QR code from 1Password on another device, which I will never not be confused by how to do that, or reference the secret key from my emergency kit, which is printed out and in a safe somewhere, right? So that's out, like, I'm here drinking vodka, and I've got a phone in each hand and I'm watching reality TV. I do not want to go and get my security kit. So the fact that they removed that like ease of setup stuff is exactly the kind of paper cut that 1Password and its metamorphosis from a very consumer focused app that where UX was king and where the most important features you could do would be to remove all of these points of friction, to the new system where I'm sure they're more focused on stuff like single sign-on, and they're more focused on enterprise features because that's where their valuation is based on it. And whenever you have to make a priority, decide the priority of like this big rewrite for this app, I'm sure that stuff that actually makes the money gets higher priority than the nice to have feature. Like, oh man, when you set up a new device, it's like instantaneously ready to go because it already has your secret key stored in iCloud. Huge bummer. So that's my 1Password gripe. What else stood out? The new camera control is a complicated button. It is a button that pushes in a little bit. It is also a trackpad. It is also a capacitive button. So there's like a little half press, right? And then there's haptics for all of this stuff. When you scroll, there's like a little bit of a slidey-do feel, almost like a wheel click. And when you half click in, you can feel the half click. And then when you really click in, you're feeling a combination of haptics and the real click. It is a very shallow click. And it's complicated just in terms of what the hardware is. And I like it. I like the complicated hardware because it's expressive, right? Like it's with software, you can do a lot of different kinds of things with that hardware. What they chose to ship is indeed a little bit fiddly because out of the box, when you scroll on the trackpad up and down or left, right, and horizontal, the correct orientation, you're zooming out and zooming in. And when you half press, you bring up another UI of what mode are you switching between. Like you can pick zoom or which lens, and at 18.1 you can pick which camera, like the selfie camera or not. Which photographic style or how much tone and undertone and overtone you want to put on this photo. And then once you half click again, then you can slide and go back. And if you full click at any time, you just take a fucking picture. And the difference between a half click and a full click, just hope you don't breathe too hard and you'll find yourself accidentally clicking the wrong kind of click too often. Additionally, the swipeable area is so small that you'll find yourself, you have to pick up your finger and go for a second swipe. But if you're not fast enough, it'll think you've stopped engaging with the control, and it'll go back to the other camera controls, and you'll lose the swipe position. So when people say it's fiddly, I think that's what that's the experience that's leading them to that feeling. But in general, if you just use it it's already set how you want it most of the time. You point, you click, you shoot. If you just want a quick way to open the camera, I think it's fantastic. And when they release a 2-stage shutter in December, I think they've said, that'll be great. You just, whenever you want to auto lock focus, you don't have to touch on the screen and do the double tap thing anymore. You can just point at something, it'll probably be like a center focus thing, but maybe it focuses on individuals and then locks to them, and then you can move around. I think that'd be great because in general, I think iPhone photos look too flat. They don't by default have very deep focus. The depth of field is relatively shallow, which is what you want if in general you're just pointing a camera at something and you just want to get a picture. But if you do have a way now with this new button for users to express that they actually would like to emphasize the focus of a thing and then frame the shot, my hope is that to the extent that the depth of field can be controlled, even though a lot of that happens in the kind of portrait mode software pipeline, we'll be able to create photos that look a little bit closer to something that you might see on fancy camera. But I'm not holding my breath, so I bought a fancy camera. The best camera is the one that you have with you, and so I want them both to be good because I'm not getting any younger. I want to get some good pictures while I got them, so I can be old and be like, I remember those days. And when I say that, I want it to be in high enough resolution. I did learn a pro tip, by the way, about this trade-in for the watch return. If you buy something from Apple and you say you have a trade-in device, that web order, in their parlance, becomes associated with that trade-in. So I had this watch, and then the Ultra was the trade-in that was paired with it. Brings down the price of the watch, and then of course there's like a Apple Card loan installment thing that's priced based on the difference of the trade-in from the retail, MSRP. And I kind of knew that if I were to return the watch, it would cancel the trade-in. So I waited to send the trade-ins in until I was sure I didn't want to return any of these products at our house. And I'm glad I did, because the second that I clicked the expressed intention to return the watch, I didn't mail it in yet. I didn't, do anything. The second I clicked the button, the very next email a minute later is, your trade-in has been canceled. And so if I had already sent the trade-in, what would have happened? Would it have been, work through the series of tubes, gotten to the trade-in partner, and then been mailed back to me? Would it have been associated with the next trade-in? Would I get it back in time to send it out as the trade-in on a subsequent order? I leave all of these questions as an exercise to the reader. The thing that you should take away, exercise to the listener. The thing you should probably take away is that if you have a trade-in on an Apple order, send it in on the last fucking day that you can. Don't don't be an eager beaver and just try to get it off your plate. Because if you end up returning the device, you're going to probably have a bad time. One other feature in iOS 18.1, I suppose, since I've been on that one since July, so I forget that it's not out yet properly. The thing that I was maybe most excited about was this new reduce interruptions focus mode, because most people aren't going to do what I do and set up my focus modes where I think really hard about here are the people who in every context of my life should be able to message me and me be notified. And here are the apps that I want to be able to notify me. Because that's a lot of work. I spent several hours on each of those. Most people aren't going to put that work in, right? And even then I still get it wrong. And so the reduce interruptions focus mode will kind of do its best to only push through notifications that it thinks you need. I haven't seen anyone else write or talk about this. There's an additional feature where you can, let's see where I'm at. Yeah, so there's an additional feature where you can take an existing focus mode and just kind of add the reduce interruptions AI sauce to it. So basically, I don't know how they phrase it, but it's like basically punch in anything that the AI thinks that you want to hear. And I figured, I'll try that out because sometimes I miss things. What I think it's doing is very naive analysis of the text of the notification and saying, does this seem important or not? Send. Send if important. So what I can tell you came through was every fucking marketing message from a third-party app that had a very dramatic call to action. Order this pizza right now. Hey, you've got points expiring in 2 hours, right? And then if you're familiar, like if you watched the Last Week Tonight on this or seen the news about the pig butchering schemes, where folks who are typically in some state of duress, being forced to text message with Americans, mostly Westerners, to engage in long game relationships via text message to try to extract money from them by falling in love over a series of texts. Oh, hi, how are you? Are you coming to the theater? Oh, it's and it'll be like a missed connection thing. So, oh, well, if you're there, like, can you help? And like, so like this whole pig butchering scheme. I don't know how many of these texts that you get where, it's like random Asian lady picture. It's like, oh, hi, like they're almost always the opener is acting like the message was not intended for you, but for somebody else. And then you're supposed to reply, oh, I think you have the wrong number. It's like, oh, do I? And then they, find some angle. And people have lost their entire fucking net worth because of the loneliness epidemic. And people meaning well, people have wired away all of their goddamn money to crypto schemes that these companies then that prey on the people who are actually doing the texting typically. It's serious, right? It's a problem. And I think that it should be taken more seriously by the carriers as well as the platform holders to try to find a way to suppress. If you get a text message that is, using an opener that sounds like this, a perfect use of AI would be to suppress that message and then do kind of like what you might see in a platform like a social network that has a direct messaging features like, oh, here are message requests or things that we downranked because we have social signals that these people are not real people or people Instead, you turn on this reduce interruptions thing and guess what you're going to get? More fucking interruptions from the pig butchering people. Like I think I had 3 within an hour of like, oh, hey, I missed you at the party last night. I'm like, fuck, like, no, you didn't. I was there. You just didn't say hi, right? I always want to earnestly like engage with these people, but because I know they're basically slaves, I'm not going to like help their metrics or make their life any better by sarcastically, because I'm in the know about what the scheme is. I'm not like, I'm not going to convince them to quit their life of crime because like, that's not what this is. So I don't actually do that, but I just always reply stop if it's an SMS or report junk if it's an iMessage. And that, as you can expect, doesn't help it fucking all. But I did turn off the reduce interruptions checkbox on my focus modes because I was extremely depressed to see that the LLM that's on board the, iPhone 16 Pro and the 18.1 is basically, has the, it makes sense, right? It's like a little baby. It's like a little toddler, right? It's like, or a senile old person who's really thirsty and lonely. Like, it's not able to detect bullshit yet. And how many years are we from the AI being able to detect bullshit? I don't know, but if you read that the essay of The Decade Ahead that I was referencing earlier, situational awareness, bullshit detection is just right around the corner. Although Apple is famously always a few years behind. One little last bit of news, because this is something that's actually not out yet. Not a thing. I realize that here we are in version 21, and I spent a lot of this time talking about old news. You're an audience with taste. You've got, I think, an insatiable demand for hot and fresh news. I feed you this lukewarm shit. You don't want to hear that. You're like, he's just going through the motions. He's just checking boxes off of his to-do list. I'm like, I had things to say. The only thing left to say on all that stuff is I think the photographic styles feature is great. Set it up. Lower the tones. Make the tone thing go down to the bottom so that your photos can have shadows again. I think that's the consensus that everyone's... Watch Nilay Patel's review of the product of the 16 Pro to understand why, but like the photos look a lot better when they have shadows, even if it means you don't always see every single detail as if it was bright outside at night. So yeah, photographic styles that you can edit them after the fact. Fantastic. I already took a couple pictures. I was like, I wonder what that would look like in black and white. Whoa, turns out it's a fucking banger in black and white. And then you can change your mind later. I think all that's wonderful. Okay, thus concludes the old news section. One bit of new news, new rumors. It is expected that before the end of the month, Apple will announce, maybe they'll do another Halloween special. I don't know that they will. Apple's likely to announce new Mac Mini that probably, if I had to guess, is going to look just like the Mac Studio, but just shrink rayed down. So like initial reports were that it's going to be like Apple TV size. It's not going to look like an Apple TV. They need to differentiate what the Mac is. Like it's got to be more premium and it's got to be, thick with two C's, so that it looks like a mini studio. Like I'm pretty sure that's what this is going to look like. And that's great. It's a great form factor. Like a big old puck. And you'll be able to put it in more places. So M4 Mac Pro, probably an M4 Mac Mini, an M4, I gotta speak more slowly with all these fucking Pros and Maxes and Minis. I'm gonna take a breath. That was my first breath in 3.5 fucking hours. How does he do it? All right, so we have an M4 Mac Mini, an M4 Pro chip in that Mac Mini as a higher spec. We'll have the new iMac, which was previously M1 and then M3, will be updated to M4 because they got to get off the M3 because that process is low yield and too expensive. So you'll probably see relatively nice jump actually in performance between the M3 and the M4. So that's great for iMac people. iMacs, the new iMac design is so thin though that it's very unlikely that they try to put a Pro in it because it doesn't have any sort of hope of an active cooling solution. Whereas even a decent heat sink on the Mac Mini would probably be enough to eke out most of the M4 Pro chips performance, if I had to guess. We're speaking the abstract here, right? Like we don't know what the M4 Pro's chips performance is, but one thing we saw with the M3 Pro and Max is that whereas the M1 and M2, sorry if you don't care about this, the M1 and the M2, there was the M1 and the M2 base level chip that was in the consumer devices. And then the Pro and Max were basically the same chip, but the Pro was just the Max with some of the GPUs lopped off and maybe more of the CPUs turned off. was generally the vibe. Also some CPUs. So like CPU count, GPU count was like a little higher on the Macs. And so if you really, really wanted to go, all out, the Macs would be better, but you're still kind of looking at the same chip. The M3 was the first generation where all three chips were clearly independently designed, where the M3 was the perfunctory base level chip. The M3 Pro was a modest improvement with a lot of focus on media encoding. So dedicated controllers on there for media related stuff like encoding video and stuff. And the M3 Max was just a fucking monster truck in terms of the die shot size, like really stressing the limits of like how big of a die can you even, using the latest lithography machines, can you even shoot at 3 nanometers? Because that gets smaller with each die shrink, because the resolution of the laser is just limited. So that was a huge leap. Of course, the performance and the performance per watt was not what people expected from 3 nanometers, and that's because that process in general, the original 3 nanometer process at TSMC, just I don't think delivered the goods. But based on like how fast my fucking iPad with an M4 chip is, I suspect we're going to see very good gains. And we'll see the whole array of all three chips along the MacBook Pro line, right? Just like last year, there's a 14-inch MacBook Pro, quote unquote Pro, with a regular M4 chip in it. But still, if what you want is a bigger screen, a much nicer screen, the port situation, even with a base M4 chip for most people, that's going to be great. Then there's going to be the 14-inch MacBook Pro that has like, maybe some nice quality of life stuff, maybe an extra Thunderbolt port. And available in the Pro and Max chip configurations and be much more expensive. And then the 16-inch, which will be available in Pro and Max and also be much more expensive. But if you've got an M4 and an iPad, if you've got an M4 in something as thin as the iMac, if you've got some number of sickos like me who only want a laptop so that they can have kind of a remote control with a keyboard attached for their Vision Pro, it would make a lot of little boys and girls, mostly boys, it would make, and by a lot, maybe dozens of us very, very happy, Tim Apple, if this was the year that we saw the return of the 12-inch MacBook Pro. Well, of course, there's never been a 12-inch MacBook Pro, but there has been a 12-inch PowerBook. And it, by a lot of like old-time Apple fans, I guess old-time now is 2004, 2005, was the pinnacle of computer design by Apple. It was thick. By today's standards, it was heavy, but it was so compact. And compared to the alternatives, it was really light. I have an M3 MacBook Air. It is too slow to be able to record my screen while I'm streaming to the Vision Pro. So I think I need the Pro chip. It is too big to feel like something I just throw in my bag and I don't feel it. It takes up too much space. I know for a lot of people that sounds silly, but for me, like I want it to be more portable. I would take a 12-inch MacBook Pro that had, no HDMI port, nothing special there, that just had, the Pro chip, a smaller screen, and if it was a little bit thicker, even if it had shit battery life, man, I'd be there in a minute. Of course, I just gave you 4 reasons why Apple's never going to make this product, but I just wanted to say out loud with my mouth words that I want it in advance, so that if it does happen, I'm going to sound like a fucking genius. But again, so that's the only real other thing coming up news-wise. Otherwise, I think it's going to be a nice, slow, uneventful month, except for the hurricane bearing down on my position right now. But that won't hit me till Wednesday, and I've got TV shows to talk about, so let's get into recommendations. Looking at my list here, you'd think that 3 weeks, I'd have consumed more media worth talking about. Well, on the video game side, I guess I can get that out of the way pretty quickly. I've been glued to, okay, so there's 2 ways to play this Star Wars Outlaws game that I've been talking about. Because I haven't had a lot of time for games, I guess it's no surprise I haven't completed it yet. Games in the last several years have typically taken me like 3 months to work through a game that other people say is 30 hours long. I'm apparently very slow, but also I only really have like one focused hour in me a day, and so it's a lot of kind of startup and tear down time for apparently making only like 20 minutes of equivalent progress a day. When I put it that way, it's depressing. But this Star Wars Outlaws game is available either for $70 retail price, or you can sign up for the Ubisoft Plus subscription, and that's like $17 a month. So as long as you play the game for like less than 5 months, it's cheaper just to subscribe. And of course, they're banking on, like every single subscription service, they're banking on the fact that like, oh, well, once you stop getting value, you'll keep paying anyway because it's auto-renewing recurring subscription. You know what I mean? So I've got this to-do that pops every week. So it's cancel Ubisoft Plus, but I haven't beaten the game yet, so I'm still playing it. And I'm having so much fun. I'm enjoying it so much that I haven't played anything else really. And I am seriously at risk of like hitting the 4-month mark and still having not finished it. So bringing me right up to that $70. I really like it a lot. Like, it just feels like a super well-designed game. And unfortunately, I don't follow gaming news because I was not aware that all of the Star Wars freakazoids, who the same people who didn't like that the main character of the, Force Awakens was a lady Jedi. They taught us all the word Mary Sue, or that trope, I guess, in progress. Who flipped out about The Last Jedi and how Luke, didn't match the childhood dream they had of who he was, as if people don't get old and grizzled, and as if all your fucking heroes that you meet end up not disappointing you somehow. Then they didn't like the finale because it was legitimately a terrible movie that tried to undo all of the, actually what I thought was very, poignant and well-crafted shit that The Last Jedi did as a kind of backlash reaction. And then they didn't like anything other than the parts of The Mandalorian that looked like a Western. They've been complaining a lot ever since. They are not happy. They are not happy people. Combine that with the fact that gamers generally are still, like anyone who identifies as a gamer, like, pro tip, maybe you're young, maybe you don't remember this, but like the word gamer is not like a term that people who play video games ever self-identified as. It was marketing language that was used during the era of like X Games, Doritos ads, Mountain Dew tie-ins with Halo. Like, gamer is a word that was invented by marketing executives to try to sell cross-promotional branding deals with video games. So if you consider yourself a gamer, you're basically tying into your identity this sort of like capitalist wet dream of all of the, you look at it this way, all of like the toxic demographic stuff that you think about of like who the stereotypical gamer is. Oh, it's like, it's a shut-in incel, white guy, adolescent, antisocial, misogynist, probably reactionary right political views, all these things. You load all that up, and then you layer on who, the product marketing lead at Mountain Dew brand or at Doritos or at Taco Bell is targeting in the late 90s and early 2000s. And then you layer the translucent document projector slide over over each other, and you realize it's the same fucking person, right? So some marketing whiz during that era thought, we will name this as a gamer. These are people who are like, you can't separate. My point is, you can't separate the demographic and all of that comes with, like the ideology, the different socioeconomic status, like all of these different factors and markers that marketers use to target individuals to sell them particular products, like, so that, like, it's all the same sugar water, it's all the same corn chips. It's just how do you brand it, right, to appeal to a particular slice of humanity. By calling them gamers and by squaring the circle, right, the way that they did. Now, when we fast forward 20 plus years later, to say that, gamers are being a certain way, or you want to identify as a gamer, reclaim the word gamer, or whatever it is, like, trying to accomplish that divorced from the knowledge that, like, this is a term that marketers used to sell ad space. Whether it was cross-promotional deals or in the early 2000s deals to like sell in like Burnout Paradise, sell billboard space and in virtual racing games. It is that. It's not like Gamergate made this. It's not like, like a certain number of people online are just toxic assholes and they happen to be gamers. It's like, yes, like a huge majority of people in the world play games in some sense. The vast majority of that is like Candy Crush style, puzzle games on phones and whatnot. New York Times crosswords. There's a huge swath of them. But the people who play like the AAA games, like I'm talking about, like the Star Wars Outlaws, a lot of them fit this demographic profile. And when we say the word gamer, all I'm trying to say here, there's a continuity of all of the stuff that people say they hate about gamers and like the origin story of the literal word gamer. And so if you personally identify with that phrase, which is a weird thing to do, right? Like generally to like target like a particular leisure activity and say, I'm one of those, as opposed to like, I'm a person who reads books, right? You could say I'm a bookworm, I guess, but also like, there aren't a whole lot of products that are marketing that aggressively to bookworms. Because you can't decouple those two words, or that word from that sort of like, the very like the marketing at that exact demographic that everyone's trying to disassociate with that word. Just like maybe you just let the word be that and stop identifying as it, right? So anyway, I play video games. I also enjoy Star Wars. I would not call myself whatever Star Wars people call themselves, and I would not call myself a gamer. I exist outside of this. I'm just a dude consuming entertainment to pass idly slices of my existence when I'm too tired to think and solve other things. So anyway, yeah, people are mad because the Outlaws game, there's a woman protagonist and they don't like her because she's not sexy enough, or she's, not Han Solo literally, or whatever it is. And, or the, complaints that the game is too buggy. And I don't know, on my rig, it's been absolutely flawless. I haven't had a less buggy game at launch in years. So there just seems like a lot of straw man arguments against it, a lot of negativity. And sadly, it reached the point where the reaction of the fan base was enough that the game didn't go anywhere near its expectations from a sales perspective. So now Ubisoft's, that was their ace game for the whole year, and their output has been shit for years now because like they've been milking dry a whole lot of other franchises. So to see like, in their last quarterly, the financials are like, yeah, this game is underperforming expectations, and there's probably going to be cuts. And so like, you can't separate the word gamer from like the sort of toxic origins of how that, how the Venn diagram of people who played games during that era and people who might want to eat Taco Bell and Mountain Dew and think of themselves as extreme and cool, how that Venn diagram became a circle, right? You also can't separate what is a AAA game, right, from that whole demo and that whole history. So, yeah, selling $70 games that have all of these mechanics that are meant to serve fans that have played 30 games like that already and they need something more complicated, or that use the dual analog stick configuration that has truly become standard. But it's like people either know how to move around a 3D space with an Xbox controller or they don't, and more people don't than do. So it's yet another sign that I don't know how much life is really left in building actually content as a AAA game that is actually good on its own, that isn't just giving the people what they say they want, which is mostly garbage. And even then, it's not, there's no pleasing them. So it's a sad time to be a video game player, unless you're a Nintendo fan, in which case, like, God, they're just making money hand over fist. Even better to be a Nintendo shareholder, to be honest. So I'm kind of curious about how Switch 2 plays out, just because like there are not a lot of games I want to play, and that it seems like the ones that are really doing great are getting punished, or doing great work are getting punished by the market. And of course, like the people who make really brilliant stuff, like Tango Gameworks made Hi-Fi Rush, which was, I didn't play the whole thing, but like it was one of the most creative fucking games I played. I was like, oh, this is great. It came out of nowhere. And then, Microsoft shuts them down, and probably for valid business reasons, but it's the business that's the problem, right? It's how the business grew up around this particular moment in pop culture and in Western demographics. So all that to say, still playing Star Wars Outlaws, still loving it. Yep. I did start one other game. I really enjoy not idle games, but games where there's like an economic resource management component, but there's a lot of kind of like dead time. Like you're doing stuff, but it's mostly routine stuff. And you're like, the activities don't require a lot of thought. So you can play a podcast or have a TV up and nearby and half watch a show and half play the game. So I've done a lot of space trucking is what I want to say. Like played hundreds of hours of Elite Dangerous in VR, where it's a game where you have a ship and you can go between space stations, and it's very realistic. And like, sure, there's combat and there's other stuff you can do, but like one thing that you can do is just get a fucking long haul freighter equivalent of a starship and go to a dock and see, like, look at the commodities board and be like, oh, look, potatoes are really cheap here. I'll buy a bunch of potatoes. And then you go look at a star chart and you're like, any places without potatoes? Oh, look, potatoes are really expensive over here. And then spend a whole bunch of time leaving the star dock and then, space trucking your way over to the other system. So that you can sell the potatoes and make a small profit, and then you just rinse and repeat that 45 times, and like, hey, look, I got a bigger ship. That kind of game, I love it. There's a similar, literal trucking games like Euro Truck Simulator 2, which is a great game where you can, own a literal truck, a commercial, tractor trailer, and it will play real internet radio music, like it feels very realistic. You're really trucking from place to place, a lot of like actual roads and stuff. It's all truncated. It's kind of semi-fictional map. Well, there's a game now, just hit Game Pass, called Space Trucker. And it's for sickos like me that want that to be a game. And you are literally a trucker in space. And you have to do stuff like put on your EV suit and go and patch, containment leaks and stuff in your truck. And yeah, you got like the bobblehead toys and you got the CB radio and you can look up and move around. So it's I did try that out, and I did confirm that I want to be a space trucker. I think that I missed my calling by several hundred years to the point where space travel is so mundane that we just have people trucking back and forth commodities. But boy, it's just the first 10 minutes. I was like, all right, well, now I know what I'm going to do for a month at least after I'm done with Outlaws. But I'm still really enjoying Outlaws. If you haven't tried it yet, if you like Star Wars at all, yeah, it's probably the best game I've seen from Ubisoft in since Assassin's Creed 2. When was that? 2009. So good on them. For television stuff, Becky, I didn't watch this, but Becky watched the Secret Lives of Mormon Wives. And the reason she did was because of all of the salacious news articles and stuff about this TikTok group of moms and the swinger scandal and like, oh, they're swinging Mormons in the sexual kind of swinging. And Mormons aren't supposed to swing, so that's salacious. And so I suspect everyone who tuned into this program on Hulu was expecting it was going to be an expose and a reality TV show about the swinging scandal that happened. But instead, it was sort of like just a Real Housewives kind of crap that went out of its way to not talk about this scandal, only obliquely referenced it. And Becky watched the whole thing just for any evidence of any of that. So effectively, the marketing wrote a whole lot of checks that the show couldn't and wouldn't cash. And watching her night by night as she watched like one episode per evening, she would just become so angry. It's because she knew she was being had, but she kept watching anyway. And I wondered if it was just us, like maybe we just like read a couple articles in the wrong order and we got that impression. And so I asked ChatGPT literally point blank. I was like, give me a yes or no answer. Are most of the people who are watching this show, do they think it's going to be about this swinging stuff? And I said, give me a probability number. And it came back with something in the 70s, right? So even ChatGPT knows that this was some marketing fluff. So this is more of a PSA. Don't watch that show unless you are looking for a real Mormon housewives kind of thing. And you don't want to see cool stuff about sexy Mormon swinging stuff. FYI. I don't know. Not my bag. What is my bag on the TV front is, I don't know if you like Batman, and I don't know what the Batman fans on YouTube are saying about it, because fuck. But holy fucking shit, is Penguin one of the best series I've seen in like years. It feels like Goodfellas, but a TV show, but also Batman. Like, Batman's not in it. It's an origin story of how the Penguin became the villain that he is, but it's not like the Danny DeVito quack, Tim Burton Penguin. It's like Colin Farrell being a good fucking actor Penguin. Really good actor. And man, it is like it's beautiful. A lot of the set piece stuff in the city and whatnot is CG, but even that looks really good. What they're able to do nowadays for I don't know if they're using the volume like Mandalorian did or what, but like the visual fidelity is great. The color grading is gorgeous. Like, as a storytelling, it's like paced perfectly. It's very comprehensible. If this was just a straight up gangster show, you'd look at it and be like, that is one of the most approachable gangster mafia shows ever. But then you have the added layer of all of these references to like the Batman universe, and you kind of have in the back of your head like, oh yeah, like I assume it's Robert Pattinson's the Batman universe, because Colin Farrell also played the Penguin in that. So it kind of picks up right where that movie left off, and one can imagine that the next chapter after the season or whatever is going to be a movie with Colin Farrell playing this role, because I doubt he wants to be in a fat suit for the rest of his life. I assume that's what's happening. I don't know. Man, it is so good. So if you haven't, don't sleep on Penguin. I'm only 2 episodes in, and already it was like I got my 3 hour in that 3 hours. I got my $15 worth for Max for the month, which is the first time that Max has been worth subscribing to for a while. So yeah, check out Penguin. The other thing, actually, you know what? I think I watched this on Max as well. Ooh, banner month for Max. Max being HBO Max, not to be confused with HBO Go or HBO Now, or just HBO. We just call it Max now. Furiosa, a Mad Max story. Wow. Yeah, just put that together. Max is in that name too. Watch that on Max. Mad Max on Max. No wonder they licensed that one. So yeah, Furiosa. I was skeptical. I really really liked Mad Max Fury Road, but I was skeptical that George Miller pull off an origin story that well, and the trailer looked kind of campy. But man, like that's just like a really really good movie. Like it, where Mad Max was more impressionistic and you sort of like, it was a lot of show don't tell. This did a lot of tell, but you've already seen. Because if you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, you've seen a lot of the spectacle, you've seen a lot of the consequences of this dark future. And here you are, sure, it's showing a lot of like the before time. Well, not literally before the apocalypse, before, things were where they were in Fury Road. But it's telling you stories that like, oh, and then it clicks and you're like, that's got that guy from the future. And that's how he wound up in this, situation. Man, just expert storytelling, also an obnoxiously beautiful film. So being able to watch that on a theater screen, like a large screen with the surround sound on and everything, like was a absolutely wonderful experience. So strong recommend Furiosa, Penguin, Star Wars Outlaws. If you're a sicko like me, I recommend Space Trucker. I do not recommend Secret Lives of Mormons. Swinging Mormons .biz. They don't deliver is what that show is called, I think. We're coming up over time here. I know that everyone wants a 3-hour podcast, but no one wants a 4-hour podcast. Or do you? Let me know by emailing me in the mailbag.
You've got mail.
Yeah, you can write into the mailbag. It's podcast@searles.co. And I will, my guarantee is I will read your email. There's one person whose email I did not read, named Trinity. Trinity, I read the first couple paragraphs of your email, but congratulations. It is the longest email I have ever received, at least for this podcast, but it is on the longer side of emails. And I look forward to taking the time to diligently reading the rest of the email. I hope that there are no urgent action items at the bottom, but it might take me a day or two to get to it. So other than Trinity, if you write to that email address and you write less than a couple thousand words, I will read the email very promptly. I may reply to the email real quick. I'll say, hey, okay. And then if it's anything that seems appropriate to talk about on the podcast, I will add it to this list and I will do my best to get to it. But, after already yapping for 3 hours, my vocal cords can only handle so much. Adam writes in, you hit close to home again talking about static site generators on the podcast. I'm giving a lightning talk. I guess that means he gave a lightning talk at Rails World titled, You Don't Need a Static Site Generator. Sorry about that. It's a bit of a clickbaity title, but the underlying message that static site generators are totally fine, but you don't have to feel bad if you choose to server-side render your marketing or otherwise static content. I rewrote our marketing site in Rails. I'm loving it, and I want other Rails devs to at least consider it as an option for their next quote-unquote static project. Choose the best tool for the team, even if it doesn't objectively seem like the best tool for the job, is the message I wanted people to leave with. Okay, sidebar. This is Justin again. Hello. I love that line. Choose the best tool for the team, even if it's not the best tool for the job. That's context is everything. That's a great line. Thanks, Adam. The talk went over well at Columbus Ruby Brigade on Monday, even though I was still finishing my slides during the meeting. Of course, the whole reason I committed to giving the talk was to force myself to have it ready at Rails World. Skipping ahead just a minute. I'm glad you're happy with Hugo, and I'm not surprised you're miserable with Squarespace. Consider bailing out now before you get in any deeper. Uh, yeah, his advice: use Rails or Hugo to build the site, and then fetch content from a CMS so that Becky never has to touch the site herself. Actually, I'm sure you considered that. So why Squarespace? Well, now I'm the one who feels like you hit too close to home, Adam. I look, building your spouse a custom web application to run her business, a Instagram-like thing to syndicate images and video and stuff to Instagram. Having all these admin tools, having custom emails, right? Like tutorialized emails when somebody joins and all this. That's like already so much dependency that I have created. And I've done as good a job as I can do on making this all very user-friendly, maintainable. Like basically it runs itself. She shouldn't really need me for very much, but if it breaks, I'm the guy she's going to have to call. What I never want to be, because I've experienced this, is like a blocker between Becky and her ability to independently create stuff. If she needs my permission or my help to get an idea from her brain onto the internet and shared with others, it will be frustrating to her and to me because I'll be distracted and she'll have to wait. And a big part of my philosophy is like, don't make people wait. Don't get out of their way and let creative people, let people who know what they're doing, enable them to get the thing done. And so my dividing line for where I was willing to write custom code was right up to the point where I could do more good than harm on that front. And I've seen it already in that she's able to program these workouts for her service much faster and at a higher level of fidelity than she could have any other way. But when it comes to writing a blog post, right, or updating copy, like that is a wheel that I am not going to reinvent because Medium would do it better, and my hope was Squarespace would do it better. And when I read this email initially, when you first sent it, I was thinking that Squarespace's blog stuff would be satisfactory. I am not so sure anymore. After Becky experimented with that Friday, had a lot of trouble with like getting the fonts right, and then realized that the fonts on the blog are the same as the fonts of the layout on the landing page, and then whoopsie daisy, all of the headers are now the wrong size and the paragraphs are way too small. We can't see anything on the landing page. And no fault of her own. It's just a shitty fucking system. So yeah, that was my thought. I didn't want to have even more custom software that she depended on me for. And I still don't. So we got to figure it out. That's one of the next things. So we're going to probably pick up next week in overtime here to figure out how to get her blogging situation situated. And with podcasting on the horizon, I don't know, again, I don't want to be in the line of fire there, but I have developed a pretty straightforward way to get podcasts onto the internet with, minimal as in literally zero hosting costs. Thanks for writing it, Adam. And I'm sorry I missed your talk. I really hope that the lightning talks get some kind of video. Dustin asks, how did you improve your posture? I'd mentioned DHH wrote a write-up about the conference and had a picture of me above the fold giving a talk in a very cool looking room that you would not believe also resulted in a less than stellar viewing experience of dark backgrounds on slides because it was half outdoors and very bright. And because I was on the post, I joked, hey, look, I'm really, really proud of this. Look at how much my posture has improved because I used to hunch really badly, even on stage. And here my back looked pretty straight. And I was like, oh, that's big progress. But yeah, Dustin, to answer the question earnestly, how did I improve my posture? I used a walking desk for years. Nothing changed. I'd sat in different things. Nothing changed. I have a little harness here called Better Back or something. And it's nice in that it does force you into the right position, but it definitely doesn't train me to sit in the right position. If anything, it's weird enough that like I'm eager to get out of it, like a brace afterwards. I've done a lot of exercises. I've improved my core core muscles. I did, a monthly challenge of a lot of planks and stuff. All that stuff has done diddly squat absolutely nothing. What has straightened me out, and this is so weird, is having the 2-pound motherfucking Vision Pro on my head for like 12 hours a day. Effectively, the way that my custom strap works, that I constructed with a combination of 3D printing and bubblegum, is it sits on my head almost like a helmet, and it's heavy enough though that if like I tilt the head forward or back too much, it's sensitive to that, and the whole thing will slide a little, which can then bring the screens in the Vision Pro out of focus. And so in order to focus and do my work, I have a tremendous incentive to keep my head aligned really, really consistently and stably. Additionally, it weighs 2 fucking pounds. And so like my neck muscles are just doing kind of passive resistance training all day long. And so, yes, it is a miracle I haven't strained anything. But because I'm keeping such a neutral position in order to see the screen in front of me, I do it when I'm seated in a normal chair. I do it when I'm seated in an Eames chair, so like a kind of backward angle, right? And I do it when I'm on a walking desk, which, Becky will comment, it is irresponsible, don't try this at home kind of stuff to be on a walking desk in VR. Just looking at it. That's how good the pass-through is, though. And it's totally fine. Drinking coffee, spilling on myself. The walking desk in particular, I feel like is I definitely you can't hunch and walk like that. If at least not if you're using the strap that I'm using and have a good time. So I think that's it. So if you want to improve your posture, just spend $3,500 on a Vision Pro, a job where you would want to be in that all day, and I think $180 for the walking treadmill. And there you go. That's all you need. And you too can have good posture. Neil asks, what'll you do with your time now that the talk's done? Well, I tried to address some of this. I'm going to take some pictures. I'm going to try to work fewer hours. I don't want to be at a computer desk 5 days a week, just because it's what I'm used to. So I'm trying to limit that. I want to embrace the shit that I've been putting off. So get back into golf lessons, get back into start for the first time tennis lessons. I'm in a golf and tennis club nearby. May as well use them. See some nature, make some friends. Probably, given all of my back and joint shit, I'm thinking more seriously about getting into yoga. I just need to find a way to do it that I don't want to use the phrase doesn't feel totally emasculating, but like the whole vibe of yoga isn't my jam, really. And I feel really uncomfortable in groups. So if I can figure out how to get over that, or just do it from home with enough form correction from Becky. So thinking about that. So that's all physical stuff. It puts me out in the world. So would this camera that I just bought. So, I live right next to all these theme parks. It'd be kind of cool. You're allowed to take these fancy cameras into theme parks. Disney's policy seems to be, don't be a creep about it. Which I'll do my best. Yeah, I mean, that stuff for starters, just to kind of decompress a little. Beyond that though, I really, really, really want to double down on my Japanese language study. And by double down, I mean start doing it at all again. And I know that I will jump at the opportunity to build an app to automate and streamline my learning process. But I first think it would be wise to start studying like a student and allow the problems that I run into emerge more naturally than for me to predict, okay, so here's what I need. I need a word bank, and I need to generate example sentences, and then I need to build a grammar with an LLM and then tell me what my grammar mistake was. Like all of those individual parts and pieces might end up in an app that I build someday, but I don't want to invent them proactively. I want them to be answers that come up in my head as a solution to a problem that I experience when I try learning the good old-fashioned way. So I'm going to be back in Japan before too long. And I'm going to be very, very mindful of the conversations that I'm having, the transactions in my life that go really well, like where am I strong, and the ones that go weak. And then I'm going to keep notes, like a notebook, to try to do pattern recognition of where are the areas that I suffer or struggle right now as an intermediate advanced conversationalist, but nowhere near fluent, right? And what is the nature of those struggles? And what should I be studying to start to address them? And only after, first collecting those observations, attempting to remediate them in a sort of offline, not app assisted, not software assisted way, only then will I probably be able to come up with an honest answer of here's how software can make this better, especially software in a world where you have ARKit, right? And it can see the world around you or read text off the page. Especially in a world with AI and LLMs, where the only thing that they're good at really is understanding give me just give me language as a normal middle of the road median person would use it. They can do that all day long, right? Explain grammar rules to me, whatever it is. So right now technology is just so perfectly like aligned with the goal of language acquisition. And I don't think there's a lot of money in it. I don't think you're going to see a lot of other upstarts doing this stuff. And so it feels like a great place to scratch my own itch and also make a positive impact on the world, because just having a universal translator everywhere is not to say a dystopian thing. It's going to be great for like lots of cases and probably shrink the world further and bring people together. But it's also going to discourage people from putting in the work to learn languages properly. And that would be a shame, because the experience of really truly getting to immerse oneself in another culture, which is inextricable from the language that people use and the thoughts that go through your head to construct the words of that language, is a really precious experience. And it would be a real fucking shame if people stopped doing it simply because the way that we teach language or the tools that we give people to improve at language themselves never kept up the pace with the expectations that people had, or our attention spans as those continue to shrink. So that's what'll I do with my time, Neil? Like short term, nothing. Long term, too much. Let's look at my. Okay, I had a big back and forth with a couple other people. I'm just hunting through the mailbox here. I may have already answered this one. Jesse writes in, I'm digging deep here. Why are ISPs so bad? What is there to do about it? This is timely. I have a Spectrum DOCSIS 3.1 cable internet subscription. I have fiber to the house, but then outside the house, they convert that in a jump box into a coax cable. It's grounded at least. And then that coax runs through conduit into my home and plugs into a cable modem. Max download speed is about a gigabits per second. Max upload is a paltry 30 megabits per second. That's the best that they can do. I want faster upstream. Why do I want faster upstream? Because I want to be able to stream high resolution screencasts. I can't do that right now, and it's frustrating. We have CenturyLink in the area, and I've got neighbors on, all around me that have their fiber service, which has symmetrical gigabits connection. So that's a gigabit of upstream and downstream, which would be phenomenal for a home streaming setup. And their address database is convinced that my house does not have service. And my attempts so far at escalating have been rebuffed. And if it is the case that the wire doesn't go far enough, then I'm ready to pull out the checkbook and ask, what's the number? How many other people in my neighborhood would I have to get subscribed to do the extra 30 feet or whatever the fuck? Yeah, so that's, that's ISP when you already have a pretty good situation, right? Like, why is it so bad? It's like there's just like an air of fatalism. One thing that's actually, in aggregate terms, actually really good is that one reason that a lot of ISPs in metros and urban areas are underinvesting right now is because they are tapped out trying to meet the demand of rural broadband to get all of that grant money that was unlocked in the Inflation Reduction Act. So several of the big omnibus massive bills that the Democrats pushed through in 21, 22, they earmark so much money for rural broadband initiatives that, and I was just reading this morning, like what Spectrum is doing in many areas is chasing that grant money by expanding their rural coverage and deprioritizing their fiber rollout as a result, because there's only so much capital out there. And they know that there's always going to be a market among luxury home buyers in wealthy metro regions to buy that fiber 5 years from now. But they know that especially if the administration flips and now suddenly you have like a less friendly, regulatory body over you doling out these grants, like this is time limited money that they can go and extend into new regions. And when they do that, now we're taking people from like DSL, ISDN, whatever, very, very, very bad connections, or people that have to rely on crappy satellite connections, bringing them up to modern cable broadband speeds. Like, I don't know. America is a work in progress. If you live in an area that is exclusively served by one ISP, you're probably having a really bad time. I'm really fortunate that that's not the case here, but it effectively is for my house, and that's what I'm working on. So thanks, Jesse, for the question. And I think that should do it. I think I got it all off my chest. I would love to hear from you. It's been, I'm looking at the mailbag now. It's like a lot of old stuff. I don't have a lot of new mail lately. I realize I do have 2 in my mailbox that like popped in incidentally while I was recording, but I don't read the emails live. You never know. If you got any tips on how to make the most of this camera or my time, write in podcast@surreals.co. Would love to hear from you. And thank you so much for joining me today. And if I die in the hurricane, all I want is for you to remember me well. Thank you very much, and good night.